Welcome to Fruiting Body Podcast. Today we have a special podcast with James Donald. He went to medical school at Oxford and he's specializing more on the business side of CBD in the cannabis industry, also with a chemist background as well. So it's going to be very in-depth, and we've brought on another specialist specifically from the CBD industry in the USA. This is Nicolas Mattingly, no association to Don Mattingly, the baseball player. I've already asked him that. He went to Florida State University. He's come over to Thailand now, and he's given us some time to come on the podcast and discuss what he did in the CBD industry in the US. I think this is going to be absolutely terrific because we're connecting the business side with the science side, and they both have backgrounds in that, so it's going to flow real well. I have a feeling I'm not going to be talking too much. I'm going to be asking the questions you might be asking. Now, before we start, smash the subscribe button, hit like, helps in the algorithm, and Talise, hit that intro. Again, subscribe. Come on, do it. It takes 2 seconds. Just smash it. All right. James Donald. We'll start with James, and he's going to give us your background on where you came from, your educational background, how you kind of came to Phuket, Thailand, and what you're doing here specifically.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me in today. My name's James, and I'm from the UK originally. Been in Thailand 15 years now. So my background was biochemical sciences and human biology. I didn't proceed with my medical career. I went off to choose a different path in computer science.
Maybe push that one up a bit.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, you'll hear it coming in and out.
Yeah, I can hear it now. That's good.
Yeah, I think you're good there. Okay.
So I left the UK many years ago, came to Thailand, lived here for 15 years, as I say, in Koh Samui, and 4 years in Phuket. For the last 20 years, though, I've been heavily involved in the cannabis industry. So I've been giving consultancy advice on genetics and extraction technologies, formulations of products. And in the last 5-10 years, obviously, more importantly on the business side of the business. So we're looking at building international trade links with countries that are coming online, legalizing medical cannabis. Up till now, obviously, America's led the way. But Thailand decriminalized cannabis for medical use. And I've been here now for 3 years helping connect hedge funds and people with big investment with the correct places to go to get licensing and build a cannabis business here in Thailand, because it's going to be a big future here.
And that's specifically kind of for the export of cannabis back to wherever, Europe, USA?
Yeah, I mean, Thailand don't have, this is their problem. They've got a view for it's for local use initially, because they don't have an overseas market, which is where I'm coming in, and I'm helping to bring in purchase orders from overseas, which is what they require in order to generate a business.
Okay, so now it's going to be a more back and forth, I think, between yourself and also with Nicolas, and we can get more into the technical side. So again, just for the audience and listeners to kind of recap, You've been doing this on the business side to help these companies, and again, they could be American companies, U.S. companies, establish themselves in Thailand through certain regulations to be able to essentially bring this product back to their home country. Now, in terms of the process itself, does that involve everything from the farming to the processing right into the final product?
Absolutely. Thailand currently has no infrastructure for cannabis whatsoever. So the growing side of it is the start. They haven't been growing cannabis. They don't understand about the growing of medical grade cannabis. And it leads into many misunderstandings they have regarding the compliance issues of trading in cannabis globally. What sort of facility do you need to have? Because it's not just about the growing. It's obviously about the building in which you're going to process the product.
Yeah.
Depends where you're sending it in the world. So they're getting their head now slowly around all these different areas, but they have nothing. There's no real growing yet. There's no real extraction. There's no real testing. There's no real product formulation. And absolutely no export at the moment to any countries.
And so basically with that in mind, and things are changing every day. So to be honest, this podcast in about a year, it might be useless information. We don't know.
Oh no, this is all situation just right now.
Of what's going
in the next few months.
Yeah, as regulation and licensing requirements change on the business side, it's still uncertain at the moment.
Well, I mean, last week, for example, I had meetings with the FDA and Ministry of Agriculture and some other big government bodies regarding export of cannabis flower, the efflorescence, THC part, because I've got big orders and contracts in Israel. And all they can say to me is, you have to build us an EU GMP facility, prove you can do it. Let's see the model, and then they're going to follow, because they don't know what they're doing, sadly, which is why we're here, helping.
And there can be risk associated with that if things don't take off.
Well, yeah, you've got to build your facility, extraction, you've got to put millions and millions of dollars in, and then you get your license.
And hoping that regulation doesn't change there either.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is more the business side, and I think we just touched on it lightly. Now we're going to jump over to Nicolas Mattingly. He, again, Nicolas, he's here on vacation, so you've been here about 5 months now. Just explain to us your background and how you got into not only the CBD industry and what you were doing with them specifically, also why you came to Phuket and kind of what your plans are for here.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, again, thanks a lot, both guys, for coming. It's quite long-winded, so I had a lot of information to throw out there. But go away and run with that.
So to start, I worked a lot with CBD, but I was focused predominantly on the THC market in the United States, although there is a very large CBD market as well. But I also started off choosing not to pursue a medical path in undergrad. Went pretty quickly into the analytical laboratory industry, analytical chemistry, and that's predominantly what I did in the U.S. cannabis industry. I worked in a series of analytical chemistry laboratories, and that's taking the products that he's producing from the plant matter all the way through to a final product, be that a cookie or an extract. And we're analyzing and producing quantified results on what the constituent parts of those products are, be them cannabinoids, things you want in there, or pesticides, things you might not.
And that's predominantly just for the THC industry. Were you doing any work on the CBD side as well?
I mean, they go together. If you're working in if you're working in medical THC, you're going to be working in medical CBD. But there is a secondary CBD gray market in the United States that exists outside of medical regulation. So when you're in an analytical lab, you're testing licensed medical products, but also you're serving this growing CBD market, which kind of fits under nutraceutical at the moment.
And we had a talk on the phone about this. Specifically, you're working for these like analytical labs. It's we can say the name.
Yeah.
Evio.
Evio
is one. Again, I'm on the mushroom side, so these companies, they're not as well known to me. This is a famous company in the industry.
Yeah.
And you were also saying that it's one of the only analytical labs that can do the COA for ISO 17025. Is that correct?
It was the lab I worked at after I left Colorado was we certified the first ISO 17025 in the state of Florida for marijuana. ISO, International Standards Organization. Yeah. So that was in the state of Florida. There were pre-existing ISO laboratories in the United States before that time. I'm not sure if they covered all the analyses we did, but it's a new phenomenon to see ISO certified weed labs for sure.
Yeah, and this is also, it can be applied to many industries. It's predominantly, it is focusing on the COAs, and we obviously understand that, but why don't you explain that a little bit? What is a COA, Certificate of Analysis, and specifically what happens in that process?
Okay, so a COA is going to look like, so if I were to have a CBD company and send it to an analytical lab, what I'm hoping to get at the end is a COA, Certificate of Analysis, that proves that the product I want to sell is both as advertised medically and safe to consume. So what that consists of in an analytical lab is using various instruments to study the different parts of whatever it is you're testing. That could be a steak, that could be marijuana, that could be any food product. So the COA is going to tell you pesticide content, the cannabinoid content,
E. coli.
If you've extracted the marijuana
Heavy
into
metals.
an oil, it's going to tell you the solvent, the residual solvents that may be left in that product. It's a report. It's a report of kind of the stress test that we've put your product under.
And maybe this is where your two paths start to cross, in the sense that you clearly are aware of the requirements of the COA for the products that you will be testing, not just in terms of your pesticides, heavy metals, but also the potency. Specifically now for your business, have you gone down this path and you know what you're looking for and what things would kind of stick out like a red flag and whatnot?
Well, it's not so much what sticks out as in a red flag. We have a standard operating procedure. So when a flower comes into the unit, really the first thing that happens is it has a heavy metal, pesticide, and a cannabinoid profile done. I'm not interested in the terpenes at this precise moment because we've probably got those catalogued for that strain. So what that means is before it hits any machinery, we're going to check if it's contaminated because we might ditch it straight away. So after that first check, a COA is produced, and that has to be logged into a system, a management system, a laboratory management system, so that we can store it. It then goes on and is chopped up, and the first extraction performed. After that, it's back to the lab for another COA. That's on the cannabinoid, because I want to see how we're progressing through the extract. Then we'll distill it, another COA. Yeah. We might make isolate, and then end products, each another COA.
Along the way. Then
we will get a third-party lab to verify our results, and that's where the ISO comes in. Because if I send my results to some Joe Blogg's lab that doesn't have any standardization and has been checked by a third-party certifying body, how do I know that the product is as reported in my COA? So it's very important. International trade relies heavily upon these COAs. They're critical to the whole mission of selling cannabis.
Yeah, and specifically for that, you can do your own COA testing. Let's say once you're farming and the product's set up and the processing is set up in Thailand, who would be your third party for the COAs? Do you need to go back to the US?
Well, no, we can't, because technically you've just seen how many times I need to do a COA, and it's not really easy to do an export of a sample for a test would require all the paperwork as if you were doing a full export. So it's not really practical to be sending THC narcotic samples. CBD samples, maybe. So we're going to be building a third-party testing lab here in Thailand that will be accredited internationally by a third-party body. Yeah, sure. For that exact reason. There's one at the moment in Bangkok, but bless them, they can do a turnaround time of 4 or 5 weeks on a sample.
Oof. And what?
Oh, I know, it's terrible.
What would you expect? Like, what's a realistic turnaround time?
I mean, for a country that's just starting, early in the American industry, you could see, not that, maybe 2 weeks. So it's understandable, but we would be pushed for a full, and our analysis was full compared to most labs, and it was 48 hours. We would put out 7, 8 analyses.
Yeah, most labs offer different SLAs, don't they?
Right.
You can pay
extra.
a premium service. You can pay it in 12 hours or
just like shipping.
They've worked the marketing out
I got
now.
you.
Yeah. Don't worry, they've nailed it now on the marketing.
And it used to be standard. When I was in Colorado, it was more lax at that time. It didn't feel like it, but it was still 4 days. But once I had moved to the larger lab in Florida, the industry had changed so much, and it's just really people expect next day, next 2 days now. 4 to 5 weeks would not be. That would be money back.
The job that you were doing in Colorado, was it the same job essentially, like in terms of your role in Florida, or did it change?
So in Colorado, that was kind of me cutting my teeth in. That was how I broke into the laboratory, this particular laboratory within the industry, analytical. We spoke about this before. There's no formalized academic training programs for the particularities of marijuana, chemistry applied to marijuana. Obviously, you study standard analytical chemistry. But if you want to know details about how to extract particular products, and you want to know how to harvest, for example, the first thing you do when you take a marijuana product is you're gonna sample that product. So you enter a grow house with 1,000 plants, and you're testing this for potency. Where do you take the marijuana? Do you take it from the top, close to the light? Do you take it from under? Or do you try to get a good general picture of the whole body of plants? So you're homogenize. It's these kind of small details that you get working in an industry that has serviced grows. Colorado, that's where I started. I guess you could say learn the particularities of the marijuana industry, having the chemistry knowledge already. You're navigating a set of regulations that's been set up and has been running for years. And Florida was taking those lessons learned, applying them to a brand new market, defining the market due to how early we were, and adapting what we had done to a brand new set of regulations that were far more strict in Florida than Colorado too. But that all culminated in the ISO push. You build a laboratory, and there's a million ways to build a laboratory that does the same thing. But the ISO test determines whether your system of accumulating and presenting data is robust and is strong and can stand up to variation and can be replicated. That your methods can be replicated and that they're valid.
And could we apply this to also with James and him setting up? Essentially, you're going to have to set up a type of testing facility here, and those barriers. There's probably a lot of, and I could be wrong, there could be a lot of unforeseen barriers that he will have to cross that maybe he needs to prepare himself. It's a bit of a long-winded question, but it's more around the idea that it's just not so simple to just set up any COA, ISO testing facility lab that's following the proper SOP. So the question to you is, what type of risks or barriers, like super higher level, do you see him facing?
What type of risk in setting up a third-party lab?
I don't want to, sorry, not risk, but just time consuming. This is going to be difficult. This is, if you're setting up this, maybe these are some of the standard operating procedures that you might struggle with because you've been through it and you've seen it firsthand.
I think if you have a strong team of curious scientists that are motivated to tackle any problem that comes in the door, let's say you have a novel product that is chemically is not similar to what you're used to extracting. What that means is you have to investigate and you have to produce a valid method. So if you have people that can do science well, you're gonna do the science well. I think for us, what threw the wrench in often was just the early evolution of a market. Like you said earlier, that this podcast in a year or in 6 months might not even be relevant.
This information,
right,
that we're discussing. Yes.
Right, because the government is itself learning about marijuana and then itself legislating as the market grows. And as new
it's like we say, you're sailing and building the boat while it sails.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely doing that here.
And on your side, so if I'm looking from the outside and just more or less just assuming, are you going to just apply like SOPs from US ISO certified labs and kind of bringing those standard operating procedures over to the lab here? Is that kind of the strategy?
Well, yeah. Mostly, yes. You don't need to recreate.
You don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No. Most of the SOPs are machine specific. So depends what equipment you buy in. But ultimately, we'll bring scientists that will either use SOPs provided directly by the manufacturer normally. So, I mean, Agilent, Shimadzu.
And we're talking about, just so people understand, machine manufacturers.
Yeah, we're talking about the companies that make the hardware that we actually put in the lab to do the analyses. Now, most of these, in the old days, you used to have a mass spectrometer and you were on your own playing with test tubes. And there weren't any SOPs defined by manufacturers to follow. Now, manufacturers make very specific SOPs to follow for a range of different products for you specifically with their machines. So they've the Shimadzu have made it so easy now. You're not going to be a third-party accredited lab with this bit of kit, but you want to know how much THC is in your product. Their bit of kit now that you can buy for about $50,000. You just follow this very simple little process. It involves adding a few different reagents, a bit of a centrifuge, plop it in the machine and hit go. That's about as complex as it gets now.
The Shimadzu Cannabis Analyzer.
Yeah. I mean,
It's a good machine.
Is it Japanese?
It is. They're terpene and heavy metal machinery. Again, now you're getting into quite in-depth science. Before, this is again almost push-button equipment. It's great. It's very expensive to buy, but they've simplified it. But this is great for in-house testing. I mean, it would be good for a qualified lab too, but you can get up and running in-house now very easy. Whereas before, it's not cheap, a whole suite of tests, is it? No. You're looking, what, $1,500 for
a sample test?
Not just cannabis, the THC or CBD. If you wanted to know about mycotoxin, infection, E. coli, heavy metals, pesticides, the whole suite you need to get done, you'd be looking at $1,000 just to get that done. Now you can buy the machinery at a reasonable price, do it in-house, and then right at the end, go for the third-party test just before you sell your product, which is all you now require.
Were you working with those machines as well?
The Evio, the last lab that I worked at was all Shimadzu. That was Shimadzu's flagship lab at the time. I'm not sure if it is anymore, but that's where really they, all that equipment that James discussed was put into under one roof, and as a cohesive whole ran. And it worked really well. When like James was saying, you have standardization to the point now where it's push button. And if anything goes wrong, you can call up an agent, and over the phone, they'll diagnose it. But in the beginning of the industry, for example, RM3 in Colorado where I worked, that was started by a Wall Street guy, I think. And he left Wall Street. He was self-taught, but these machines, when you analyze the marijuana, they have essentially a reference number. So you teach the machine what a 20% marijuana looks like, to put it simply. You teach it a range of values, so that when you put your sample from the field in the machine, it can kind of cross-reference the value that it's seeing with what it already knows. But you need to have those accurate standards. You need to have a vial that says this is 20%. This is what 20% looks like.
Calibration standards.
Right, calibration standards. It's how you calibrate the machine.
Yeah, every morning you have to calibrate.
Right, every morning you're calibrating. And those calibration standards, they were not on the market when Colorado came online. So he was making his own calibration standards in his basement as a self-taught chemist. That's an extremely complicated thing.
How would you get that initial 20% vial, let's say, because you got to benchmark off something, right?
You go to a company like Sigma Aldrich and you pay about $300 for a little tiny vial of a known standard. And because of their ISO certifications and their business processes that they're accredited to as a supplier of lab equipment, you can be rest assured that what they've just given you is what's on the labels, what's in the bottle. And that is really important. There's only a few major companies you can rely on for calibration standards, because that actually is underpinning the key of the entire result that the machine's going to give you. Because if, like you said, if you've got wrong calibration standards, the machine will never give you the right result. You'll always be reading the wrong result. So, yeah, if it wasn't 20 milligrams per mil of THC, you got it was all, your end results are going to be wrong.
And Nicholas, did you have to use this type of technique or strategy to calibrate your machines as well? Like reaching out to what would you call them? Third-party suppliers of the product, a supplier of the product itself, for you to bring it in-house to calibrate your machines? The
calibration standards?
Yes.
So anytime you're going to use these machines, spectrometers and chromatographs, anytime you're going to use these pieces of equipment to study anything, even if you're studying a vitamin or Advil or an apple, you need to calibrate this equipment to that.
Got it.
So, like Sigma Aldrich, as was mentioned, this is a lab supply company, chemical company, and they are extracting or producing pure THC to an extremely accurate percentage, and we can, based on the assumption that lab being ISO certified and reputable, we use that as a standard to calibrate the machine. So anytime you're using a piece of analytical equipment, you have to have a calibration that you're referring to.
So anyone looking to start a CBD company, let's say specifically in the US, a couple things that you would want to be looking for, not just in a supplier. Let's say if you were to buy, we call it like a white label supplier that's supplying, many different people that you can throw your own packaging on it. When you're reaching out to them, these types of questions, would you consider them high priority? Who are you dealing with? Where are you doing testing? What's your benchmarking? Where is that product getting benchmarked from? In terms of the testing, what machines are they using? Would there be like a standardized list of 20 questions if you want to sell your own product in the US as a white label?
You want to vet your lab. I personally enjoyed it when I had clients that had a scientific understanding and they would hold us accountable. I enjoyed it when we would produce a COA and then the company would come back and ask about our methods. How did we produce the COA? But if you're in the position of starting a company, you want to 100% be sure who's testing your product. If they do a bad job testing, you may have a great product that gets a stamp of disapproval from a lab that's not doing good science.
Well, you don't know these days, though, because you've seen recently some of the stuff going on in America. You've got accredited labs, government accredited, 2 labs. Apparently, on paper, they look like they can do the job, and they're both repeatedly coming up with wildly different results on the same sample.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, this is a very, very good point, and it's a worrying point that's been looked into scientifically, because the FDA in America is getting really concerned that at the moment there's now non-standardization for various reasons, even within standardized ISO certified labs. And it comes down to all sorts of preparational techniques, differences in SOPs and equipment. And I think, what have you heard about this? What do you think is the major reason for these differences? The differences in equipment that's used, or the actual process?
Specifically, if you have 2 ISO certified labs producing different results?
Yeah, that are using, one's got a Shimadzu, one's using an adjuvant. They're using the same calibration standard from a company. Yep. One's coming up with a different MG result to another report for the same flower.
Yeah,
this is common.
Most laboratories in the US still for weed are not going to be ISO certified for every analysis. And even the ones that are, I can't speak to the details of how that would get corrupted, but they're really, if all of your analytical equipment is being traced back to the same place, you should not see variance unless you see errors in preparation, I would assume that there's errors in preparation.
Well, I think the other thing we see is the difference in quality of equipment used. For example, I can go and buy a gas chromatograph from a company brand new in America for about $30,000 that will be absolutely adequate to give me some information on my cannabis levels, in my CBD levels in my flower, for example, in a field. It's got about five times less the resolution of the Shimadzu equipment. So we've got resolution issues.
In terms of accuracy on testing?
Actually accuracy. These things, at the end of the day, when you either inject a liquid or a sample into a machine and it gets turned into a gas or a liquid, depending on the bit of equipment, shot through this system, comes out of a hole, basically, where an analyzer reads it, either a mass spectrometer or an infrared system that looks at the amount of individual atoms of the THC that are coming out. And the sensitivity of that equipment is different for different companies.
So won't these accredited labs, so one of the labs I was working with for medicinal mushrooms in USA is NSF. Again, it's an ISO 17025 accredited lab, but let's say specifically for cannabis testing and trying to understand, again, focusing on the COA and the potency of the product itself, wouldn't they have to make it a standard of the machines need to be the same at every single accredited lab? Is that the only way to keep things consistent?
It's not worded really like that, the ISO standards. The ISO standards around maintaining accuracy through a repeatable process, which can be self-defined by the lab itself. So there is no one body that says this is the process you're going to follow.
So to your point, it should be, you're speaking earlier, you have different equipment. If you've got one lab that's running one brand of equipment and you've got another lab that's running a different brand that's older, technically, if they both passed ISO, those methods are validated, and they should produce the same results. So there's something going on there that I think personally comes down to the age of the market and the lack of accountability. It's a state-to-state thing in the United States. There's no federal regulation on analytical testing. Mm-hmm. The FDA generally will provide you SAPs for various agricultural products, and that doesn't exist either. There's no central body.
No, they leave it up to you. So again, in the past, THC has been tested. When you're looking at a THC in a product that's supposed to be non-detectable, for example, here's another little caveat that happened. A lot of testing equipment wasn't that sensitive. So they were giving ND, non-detectable, THC readings to a person's product, which meant that they were then bottling it up, marketing it as THC free. So it could be used by an airline pilot, someone, blah, blah, blah. Actually wasn't THC free at all. It was just that the equipment they used ran out of capacity and ability to detect minute quantities. It just wasn't sensitive
and
enough.
Once you learn that, you can start deliberately using that fact to benefit your CBD customers. Like if you've got a CBD customer that wants to produce a product that has no THC, but you know your piece of equipment is not strong enough to detect THC.
So this is where your question, you need to choose your vendor carefully. So I would be looking for someone that has a very good quality bit of kit that can do a very high resolution on the THC, especially if you were doing an ND. If you just needed to check you were under 0.3%, probably all right. But not when you're making the non-detectable. So there's been heaps of products made and released on the market with THC in.
And that's because the accredited lab doesn't have the proper accurate testing equipment.
Yeah.
And in on your side, and maybe your mic, you just got to lean sometimes when you just tilt it. That's okay. Back to that. So how many different, like if you were to think off the top of your head, how many different accredited ISO 170 ISO labs are there in the US?
How many
ISO 17025 labs for this type of testing
for marijuana
are actually in the US that you could choose from?
Thousands.
I
mean, thousands of ISO facilities.
But are they accredited?
But for specifically marijuana, there's not thousands yet.
Hundreds, probably.
Maybe hundreds. So, and that's where this issue is. Within those hundreds, there's no consistency because maybe some of those, they're using machines that are not as accurate as others. And that's where you use it as, and I'm just recapping. That's where it can be an advantage if I am getting into the CBD industry and I want to say, yeah, my product is 0 THC, but I know that this accredited lab testing equipment is not as accurate as that one. Therefore, I'm going to go to that one. Yeah. Is that the point you're trying to make?
Absolutely. It completely. Yeah. Not everyone has the same equipment. And you can find out from asking what the piece of kit is, the resolution of it, the quality of it. I mean, a Shimadzu, some of the higher end mass spectrometer equipment are millions, $3-4 million just for the detector bit that sits on the end, because of the incredible capability of it to detect minute amounts of a product, super minute, that you won't, even the Shimadzu kit, it's $50,000. It's only got a specific, you can get more expensive Shimadzu equipment than that, but just the entry level that we were saying, the cannabis analyzer, even that is great for in-house use. You wouldn't want to use that in a lab because it just doesn't have the resolution. Mm-hmm. You're looking at millions of dollars for something super accurate to sit on the end of the analyzer to measure the outflow of what it is.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that goes back to Nicholas's point where you're saying that there is no federal governing body for these accredited labs, meaning it can fluctuate state to state. So if you know that in, let's say, Florida, their equipment is not as accurate as Colorado, and I'm a CBD company that wants to say 0 THC, and I'm aware of that information, you're going to take your product to Florida to be able to be accredited as 0 THC. Is that kind of the point we're going over?
If you're a THC, so for analytical testing for almost everything within the regulated THC markets, those are going to stay within the state. We never got shipments of medical THC products from other states. It's illegal to ship.
Federally illegal to ship across the state.
Right.
So this is a huge issue in the entire CBD and marijuana industry in the U.S. There's no consistency on products.
And you're siloed. So you have all these states and science really relies on there being an abundance of as much information as you can. So you have labs protecting their IP and protecting. If you're in a state where every lab except you is failing edibles testing, but you're not, what incentive is there for you to share that edibles methodology with other labs? You wouldn't need to in a federally regulated environment with the FDA regulating it. Everybody would likely be using the same exact processes.
And that cannot exist until every state kind of came on the same page, because you have different federal or state legislation in Florida versus Texas versus California, and nobody's working together. Now, so that's not an issue on the business side. It's the governing bodies themselves on legalizing or legalizing that different levels of potency in their states, but there's no consistent federally. The question is then, how the hell are they going to fix this? When is this going to be federally consistent?
When they federally decriminalize it.
And is that happening?
Yes.
When and are you guys? Maybe you guys can chat about that because you're more involved. When do you think that's going to happen, or is that a lot of it hearsay?
I agree that I think it will be happen when I can't. I
don't think it can be hearsay now. It's got so much momentum now in so many states. I just can't really get my head around that the feds will not want to take advantage of this finally now. There's just been too many political reasons why they haven't really finally got involved. But they've been happy to let how many states now get involved? I mean, the number
recreationally almost a dozen now.
And the number that medically, where you can just walk in $50 and walk out with a bag of weed, is nearly every state now.
Yeah, but two of the more highly authoritative states, especially in terms of electoral voting power, Florida and Texas, they're definitely holding back at the moment, correct?
Well, no, Florida's now
Medical.
Yes. I don't think they're going to do. There's too many old people there enjoying their retirement that don't want to see kids walking around with doobies on the street. So I don't think they're going to do recreational. But medical, yeah.
Do you see any other issues why Florida wouldn't do it?
Wouldn't do recreational?
Yeah.
It's in the South.
Conservative.
Yeah, I think it's not as straightforward. Colorado is known to be a purple state. Like they would say, you have a lot of libertarian leading red and a lot of Democrat. It makes total sense that Colorado legalized recreational first. For Florida, every year that I was working there, it was, it's going to happen this next legislative session. Oh, it's going to happen this.
I waited for years, Right. I couldn't believe the day they finally did it. I thought, wow, at last.
The medical.
The last state has fallen.
But the medical, like a lot of states in Florida, I mean, to get a medical card in Florida it's going to a doctor's appointment. You just say the right things, you get the card. And
you just say, I can't sleep at night.
It's an excuse to buy marijuana if you want to use it recreationally. Let's make no bones about that. Same as it was in California, paying $40, being able to sit in front of a doctor behind a bulletproof screen so he can't even touch you, and him just hold up a sheet, tick some of these that's wrong with you. And you tick, I've got backache.
And I think it's been like that for, let's be honest, 12 years, because I remember hearing this in California when I was traveling through it in 2008. Yeah, everyone had medical cards. Even it was more liberal and advanced than being in Toronto, Canada. Yeah. I mean, we still had to buy it on the streets there. So I think this is a bit long-winded, but it's very important, because from a business side, if I'm starting up a CBD company in the US, let's say, wouldn't it make most sense for me to choose an accredited lab that has the most accurate technology for testing my product? Because let's say 5, 6 years or 10 years down the road, whatever, when there is a standardization. Now, if I was using a lab that's equipment was not as accurate, and then they make this protocol or standardization of it has to be this exactly, right? Well, now these labs, they're going to force me to go there. And if I went to this lab that did not have proper accurate testing equipment, I need to change my entire product, don't I? Because I don't match it anymore.
Well,
so my point is there's a lot of risk also by not using the right equipment with an accredited lab, because in the future, your entire product might change. And won't that affect everything from the potency to the flavonoids and the product itself?
No, make no... Laboratory testing and the way in which it's done can have reprisals later on in many other areas, not just in the cannabis industry. I mean, recently, in New York, there was a massive problem with their testing process, right? So what they did is every time they got a sample from the police from a prospective drugs criminal, they tested it, and then they ran a computer algorithm on the result, and they weren't actually analyzing in the way that we traditionally do. You know, it's a one sample through. We don't run any computer software on it to try and analyze the percentage chance that it's wrong or right. And they were locking people up based on what a computer was telling them.
Not an actual chemistry test.
They were doing a chemistry test, but what they were doing is then running all the results for that. If it wasn't completely clear, for example, on some aspects, they would run it through this probability calculator, which looks at
based on past experiments.
All sorts of other things. And it was completely, they made it in-house. The DEA created it for this lab, bespoke, completely flawed. It had locked thousands of people up in prison.
But so they created the standard itself, which...
Yeah, so again, it's every lab creates, like he said, develops their own standard operating procedure, guards it carefully. And I mean, recently in California, 8 labs in the same area all had to give up some samples and were tested by the government. Every one of their samples that they tested came back with a different result, all the 8 labs. When the government tested it, according to their official standard protocol, it was close to some of the others, but the point was that all 8 labs gave a different result.
And you'd expect a small difference.
But not wild.
Right.
Like you're talking a 10, 20% difference.
Yeah, like quite significant. I mean, enough if you were on a non-detectable product, it's no good. It's in medicine, we have to follow pharmacopoeia. We have to be within 4% normally of a given value. So if I say there's 500 milligrams in this bottle, there has to be that plus or minus 4%, or it's not a pharmaceutical product. So
informally, the CBD industry runs on a 25% variance.
Well, yeah, and here is when we said this is another debate, isn't it, as to whether CBD is it's a medical product, right? As far as I'm concerned, we are saying that there are medical benefits to it. We're researching that clinically in hospitals. So therefore, we will formulate medical preparations eventually in the correct formulations to help specific diseases. Therefore, it's a medicine. So it has to be following how we behave with medicines now, which is 4%, not 25%. The TGA in Australia have acknowledged this already, and they've said that, no, they've cut the dosage maximum you can put into a single vial, a single dose of CBD, and it has to be within specific tolerances every time. Otherwise, it's not on the list. So, yeah, this is where we're going, I think, with the industry generally. We've been lucky up till now. It's been an absolute free-for-all.
And you are lucky. If you can use that to your advantage, you can be very lucky.
How can you be consistent to have your product always with this 4% variance? What does that...
I would recommend in this environment, if you're just releasing a new product, to test your first few products in your portfolio with multiple labs and really ask them after about their products. Speak to the lead chemist.
But this 4% affects your... It's so significant, really, that you look at a pharmaceutical business and the way that they prepare a drug, the standardization and the repeatability, and then you transform that to our industry. What it means is caps on some of the stuff we've been talking about, how you grow the plant. If you grow big plants and you don't grow them in a very specific way of pruning every time, you get variation in the plant. You get variation in the plant, you're going to end up with variation in your end product. Now, if I'm making a full spectrum product, for example, I want to be able to take out of the plant what sits in it every time and not mess around with it and change it. And I want it to be the same every time I harvest a plant. Now, that's really, really hard to do. And so what you have with this 4%, so now what you've got happening a lot, let's say you've got, because of the variation in plant strength, when you go to extraction, you'll get a variable strength extract, which now means, so now you're making tincture pots that have to have, say, 1,500 milligrams of CBD per 30 milliliters of carrier oil. Well, if this month's harvest and oil is different to the last month's, I've got to start tinkering to get concentrations right. So now to manage, now we're bastardizing the mix.
So then with the answer to that, and this is why it works in the pharmaceutical industry, because it's synthetic, right? So, for example, synthetic opioids, like you get your Valiums, and this is essentially still derived from plants, from poppy plants.
But they even have facilities that utilize plants that are standardized, like you said too. You can bring growing a plant up to a level of standardization.
Yes, we can. We can get it almost nailed, and we keep sort of genetics.
But this does not currently exist as something that's being developed in the industry.
Yeah.
This standardization of plant growth.
Oh, yes, it does. I mean, we're in such an advanced way now that we accept the stability of the genetics is so important and key to every other stage, that there are massive companies that have poured in hundreds of millions of dollars into genetic research and maintaining and making stable genetics. Yeah, it's huge business.
So if you look at, for example, a company like Afria, multiple billion-dollar market cap, they probably are there. But there's thousands of licenses across the western half of the United States that almost are definitely not there.
No.
And I think that there will be a huge sea change when we see the federal government roll into action. And there's going to be a lot of people that can't keep up with the regulation. It's going to totally change your life as a business owner.
Your product will fail, won't it?
Well, wouldn't you just be able then kind of shy away from your own testing in-house and just rely on third parties?
No, I think it's too expensive to just continually rely on that.
So then that's the competitive advantage of these big players, because they can control all their testing in-house, but they're doing that because they have the cash flow.
Well, you don't have to have big money to get a fairly accurate test in-house now. Most cannabis companies that are, even a small to medium size, have got some form of testing. I mean, you can go and buy an Orange Photonics box, which is a liquid chromatography unit, which for about $10,000, that little bit of kit could be operated by someone in the field after 10 minutes of instruction, and will give you pretty much
fairly accurate.
Yeah, you're 99% of the way there. Yeah, so no, most companies do in-house testing. It's just the final third-party authority that you need.
Understood. And so, Nicholas, on your side, when you were doing testing in Colorado, did you notice, now, were you dealing with like these white labels? Were you dealing with like big formulation companies, kind of like a supplement company essentially? Or were you dealing with the farmers directly?
In Colorado, it was a lot of farmers directly. In Florida, we had a lot of gray market. We had a much larger CBD industry in Florida, because in Colorado, the lab we were working at, if you were testing medical marijuana with a barcode registered in their government system as a marijuana plant, you weren't allowed to test CBD products that were not registered as medical CBD. So in Colorado, you have medical CBD and you have CBD that you can buy from a smoke shop.
Okay.
Right?
Now, what's the difference between the two?
One has been recognized as existing by the government, and one has not. That's really it.
They're still using the same terminology? Is that for marketing purposes, or what is the reason?
It's just the way you structure your business. In Colorado, you could start a CBD business where you sell CBD tinctures, but it's not going to be prescribed by a medical doctor. Or you could grow a hemp plant and produce medical CBD, which is sold in dispensaries alongside THC. Mm-hmm. So you have concurrent markets. So we were only, in Colorado, we were testing official THC dispensary grow house extraction facility products. In Florida, it was more Wild West. So you had a very early marijuana market, but then you also had this pre-existing market of unregulated CBD companies, which were, like you said before, they were CBD and a little THC companies.
Well, yeah, I think that goes off James's point, and that's kind of why I brought this back to the Colorado side and understanding the consistency within testing the product itself. Were there certain farmers that you worked with where time after time after time there was that consistency in the testing? And let's say you had 10 farmers. How many of them were actually consistent?
Okay, that's a good question. Like, I would say... overall, the larger you were, the more consistent your grow got. I mean, roughly.
Okay.
Or the more money you had to put into it. We had a lot of small grows, even in our immediate facility, that were constantly having trouble and failing.
So what, like as a percentage, if I have 10 companies, 2 of them are able to stay fairly consistent just by sheer size?
Maybe I couldn't give you a real accurate number on that. Mostly people are keeping within 10% of their last season. In Colorado, they have a regulation where if you produce accurate numbers within a certain percentage range on Blue Dream strain marijuana, you grow Blue Dream 3 years in a row, if the same lab tests that and it passes 3 years in a row, the fourth year you don't need to do an analytical test on that. And we had plenty of customers that passed that.
Okay, that's always been as we'll come back to James because I want to dive into how he plans to be consistent with your farming and your regulation in Thailand. But we're going to go down that, and it's going to go a bit, I think. Before we jump into that, that was one concern I had, because we're getting into medicinal mushrooms and we have to produce COAs, and that's fine. I can produce my COAs of where I'm farming, and again, at the end of the day, that's bullshit. I can make a fake COA, no problem. Then we have to do the COA again in the US. But it's only on the very first batch so I could buy a batch today, send it, get my COA here, send it to the US, get my COA, great. And now I can produce 20 batches for the next 20 years and I never need another COA from the US. How does that make any sense?
Well, it won't to your customers, and your customers are probably savvy, like customers in the cannabis market now. And they expect to see a COA for every bottle that they buy. Everything that anything that they buy with that active ingredient should have a COA,
and that would be attached to the lot number or the batch number on the bottle.
Yeah, exactly. Should be accessible. We have what's called seed to sale software, which means that we capture every piece of information from the seed to every chemical that was ever applied, touched, even the soil that it was grown in. Where did it come from? What lot number was that? Fertilizers, mix lot numbers. We keep everything.
All that data is in a software that your customers have public access to.
Well, they'll have access to certain aspects that we give them. So, for example, we're going to be quite novel, and we have a blockchain solution that will store irretrievably all of the information from the start to the end, so that a government, if it looked at the data, could trust that it hadn't been manipulated and changed. So the blockchain just enables the non-manipulation, and the seed to sell software that sits on top of that keeps all of the information from the birth of the seed as it goes through the field, who harvested it, who put it on the truck, who milled it, who put it in the extraction machine, what time did it go in. That will then correlate with a log number on the extraction machine. We will then be able to go and look at every parameter that ran on that machine when that plant was running through it, the pressure, the temperature, everything.
And that's just giving more confidence in your customer in terms of consistency in the product?
Well, for them and us, it gives us the capability and the knowledge of knowing that I'm keeping within such sharp boundaries that I'm going to be producing a medical grade pharma product, because those are the lengths you need to go to. And for the client, obviously, they're going to be able to see the entire birth of their product.
But, I mean, regardless, you control that data. So therefore, there's still like...
I control it, but can't manipulate it.
You cannot manipulate it.
No, and this is a key part of where
because it's on the blockchain.
Yeah, and this is...
Okay, that's interesting.
It's a new technology move for cannabis to utilize blockchain, because most people just think Bitcoin money is on the blockchain. No, the blockchain is just a technology that enables a diverse set of data to be stored irretrievably in a multiple decentralized fashion. Yeah. And that is what that's one of the reasons federally cannabis has not got to the final push as well. It's not just political. There really hasn't been the technology to give complete compliance and faith to the government that people are towing the line. Taxes are being disclosed correctly. With the blockchain system, if I spill some distillate, THC distillate on the floor, a QA person has to come, sign off what was spilt, who did it, and that then is destroyed off the list. That's a grey area, destroying products and things like that. That's where
loss of profits, and you got investors.
No, it's not just the profits. It's more the liter. It's more the liter of oil going down to Miami Beach.
The waste management.
Yeah, the waste. So how do they know that that actually did get destroyed and that person that signed it off? So this is all building a system of non-repudiation.
And Nicholas, were you aware of this as well? Like, or this concept of the blockchain in terms of measuring all throughout the entire process?
I've heard of blockchain being used in other industries as a way.
But not at this type of.
Not in weed. No, I've heard of. I had heard a couple of people in the U.S. create tokens. I think that they meant for sale, so that it was anonymity in sale. So if you were to sell or buy it, there would be it would be. So the government couldn't trace.
That's a separate thing. So we've tokenized. We're offering an IPO tokenization of our business too. So you can, instead of buying a share, you buy a token that represents a plant for say $10.
But is it finite? Like like Bitcoin is finite. Like there's only X amount. So
Well,
on your blockchain, is
so
your token is finite, or
well, we have two. It's a different blockchain. One blockchain manages the seed to sale stuff.
Yeah,
that's just like a normal SQL database in it. Just imagine it as a database, but it's just not owned by us, so we can't screw it around. The tokenization also sits on a blockchain, but that's a monetary gain.
It's like buying shares.
Yeah.
We're basically going to offer all the plants as shares. You buy a share, i.e. a plant. In 3 months' time, that plant doubles in value. Your $10 token is now worth $20.
And where would people buy it? It has to be like, what's the platform I need to enter?
We have a website where we are offering the coins, where you go, you buy your coin with your credit card, and then later on you can cash your coins in when you want, and obviously sell them through BitCub or one of our Binance, etc.
So it can be accessed by Binance.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's that's a separate money-making side to let small investors capitalize on the green rush.
And I mean, in that whole concept of, let's say, the blockchain of purchasing shares, essentially, or tokens.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a conversation on its own that we could go down a
big
rabbit
one,
hole
so
for about an hour.
Yeah, of course.
So if I'm an American, well, I'm not, I'm Canadian, but if I'm an American and I'm looking to find a CBD supplier, what are the top 3 things that you would look at? Now, Nicholas, do you purchase CBD?
I don't buy it by itself, but I do like it as a part of other things.
When you did purchase, are you doing your research on who you're getting it from, and what types of things are you taking into consideration before making that decision?
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking to see if they have COAs. I'm looking to see where it comes from. I'm looking for information on that lab. I'm looking for just common sense mistakes on the COA. I'm trying to think of someone who's just practically an everyday person who's going to be going and looking to find something. Yeah, hold them accountable. Because like you said earlier, you could test on a batch and 10 batches later using the same.
Yeah, that's kind of the point I'm trying to get to. Of my main concern is, again, to educate people out there is, and probably some of our terminology, it might be going over some people's heads because it's all new to them. Obviously, I've been researching this stuff in my world for about a couple of years now. But how can people gain access to the COA of a specific batch? Like if they bought a tincture of CBD, there has to be a lot number on there. Is that COA public, or how can they get that information?
Up to the company normally.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the first thing you want to look at. So straight away, if there is no COA offered on a website, if they don't state that they offer per batch COAs, leave the website straight away. Because
where would you find that information on the website? Is there a specific, like a learn section, or like how would they be able to navigate that?
Most people should advertise in their FAQs, in their frequently answered questions, if they offer COAs. And I would look on the page of the actual product itself. So most professional, so for example, we would offer on the actual product page a copy, an example copy of the little tag that you'd be scanning and the COA that it would bring up. So what you would expect to see and how to read that COA as well. Yeah. That's all on a tab of information on the product. So it's very clear from immediate day one. We go through the process. We explain how we get a batch lot number, what that means, and how we can recall batches. This COA pertains just to your bottle, not to one we did 2 years ago. They're live bottles, and they can be verified, the COAs.
Because it's third party at this point.
Yes,
that's what's very important to understand.
This is the really important part. Yes. Yeah, it's not our test.
Because anyone can make that shit up.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, therein lies the trust with the customer. Yeah. If you can scan the code on the back of a bottle.
And it goes to a third party.
And imagine on our products,
Yeah.
it doesn't just even bring up the COA. It brings up the name of the farmer that grew your plant. We could even, if we wanted to, have a little picture of him there. So you could see the picture of the family that grew the, the plants. And then we can, it really is, there's no level where it could end. We can have video footage of the plant going into the extractor. So someone could see, wow, that actually was my plant, and that's the batch that went through the machine.
So your business model then in Thailand, you're going to be involved. At which part do you leave the process and hand it over to the supplier? You're not dealing with the end user, right? Are you planning to kind of be the manufacturer, we would call you, or the wholesaler?
We're a vertically integrated business, actually. So we do actually have retail and clients, yes. So we will be setting up dispensaries and clinics, and we will be supplying hospitals and medical practitioners, obviously with prescription grade products. We'll be supplying white label products, the wholesale oils and bulk products, a whole massive range of different cannabinoids.
Or then your pricing structure has to be all set up so everyone's can make a piece of pie throughout the process, right?
The pricing structure is a closely guarded secret because at the moment, America is burning on a glut, selling through a glut of product. When that glut's gone, we're going to have a resetting of the commodity price globally of the CBD market.
What do you mean by that?
Well, America at the moment, so look, just some basic figures. It costs America, a farmer, $20,000 to grow 1 acre of hemp plants in a field, approximately, if you look at average figures, maybe 20 to 25,000 US.
And are you taking in consideration height and weight?
Well, just look at just generally what that generates. So that 1 acre on an average will make about 50 kilos of CBD isolate. I got offered isolate this morning at $250 US a kilo. Wow, if you work out, they've got 3,000 kilos of it, and he's got lots of friends that equally have just as much sitting in a shed.
Okay, let's define CBD isolate first, just because I think that's a term, so people understand that.
So you have the CBD plant, which has got mainly cannabidiol. We process that with a first level of extraction to a crude oil. The crude oil then has lots of plant waxes, chlorophyll, contaminants in it. So we put that through a distillation system. That purifies it to say 90 to 93% CBD, but it still contains some other contaminants. So we then put it through a final process where we then crystallize the CBD out of the solution, and it drops out.
Are you using like a spray dry technique? Or?
Well, we actually use a very high-tech continuous process of, it's a special machine, a countercurrent crystallization reactor.
Spin dry or completely different?
No, the normal way is just a reactor, just a big vessel. You dump the oil in, you put pentane, which is a hydrocarbon, into the CBD oil, and then you have a stirring device, and then you alter the temperature and pressure of the reactor, and at various stages of temperature and pressure, the crystals will crystallize out. And you then wash them, clean them, dry them, chop them up to a specific size, and that it looks like sugar. That will be your CBD isolate.
So you're saying that 1 acre,
1 acre,
a farmer will their cost will be 20 grand.
About 20 to 25,000 just to grow the flower. We've not extracted it at this stage. Now they give it to a processor where they can either pay money to extract and get all the product back, or they can donate. Well, I say donate, they get charged a proportion, 20% on an average, a tolling fee. So they get 80% back of whatever it is that they ask for. It could be they could ask for crude, distillate, or isolate. So if you do the quick maths, you'll work out that I think it was about $8,000 worth of isolate is currently for sale now, and that costs 20 to 25,000 just to grow the flower. So the farmer's making about a 60% loss currently. There's a glut like this in America right now. Everyone jumped on the bandwagon, and farmers just dropped what they were doing, dropped the strawberries and the corn, and ran to hemp because they thought it was gold. Mm-hmm. They had no idea about the market they were getting into. They just thought that the world required oil tankers of this stuff going out the door. And in fact, no, we don't need oil tankers. We need small tankers of specific oil that's been produced in a specific way. And they didn't think about this. They were buying extraction equipment, keeping it on the farm in a shed, making crude. This is not medical grade. This is not a GMP building. So they've lost loads of money.
Because they've invested in that equipment.
Yeah, most of them have invested, not just equipment, but just the farming. They gave up their traditional farming methods, jumped into this. They've now got barns full of flour. I've got flour for sale. If anyone wants 15% CBD flour, $10 a kilo.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost valueless now. So, but when it's gone, it's gone. What farmers are going to come back in knowing what's just happened? I don't think many, because here's the sad part. Thailand, we're 10 times cheaper with labor. Average cost of an hour's labor in America is about $20 to $25 for 1 hour, just for a farm worker that basically cuts weeds. Now, I get 10 members of staff for that, for a whole day.
Yeah.
So, sorry, states, but your days are numbered for
the manufacturing side or the farming side.
The farming side, I keep telling people, it's like growing tomatoes. It's
no reason it shouldn't be.
There's no value in the growing.
Right.
It's not the easy bit, but it's the first low value bit, so to speak. It's then the further processing, the GMP lab, the facility, all the testing. It's everything else that is all your R&D.
Yeah.
You know, why do you think most drugs from pharma companies cost us so much money? Because of all of the extra care and attention that a farmer didn't put in. So at the end of the day, whoever's prepared to spend the money and put this work in will be the ones that benefit down the road. I mean, most EU CBD has got to come off the market and the shelf in the next few months, because the manufacturers haven't put it through a GMP facility, and it doesn't have UK novel. It doesn't have.
So it's just not economically viable for it to be farmed in the US at all.
No, not anymore.
It doesn't make any sense.
Especially in areas in the US. I mean, there's areas in the because it's siloed state to state. You have states where there's really have no business growing marijuana plants.
No.
In their environment.
Because of the cost of the land and the labor.
Well, just the environment.
Look at Florida. There's people growing they really, really insisted that they were going to get some action. So they developed a few strains that grow in the humidity of Florida.
But they're still doing this to this day. It's being grown in Canada, Colorado. But I mean, eventually there'll be a point when the market, it's just too expensive to follow that.
There's no agricultural product in the world that is distributed like that, right?
Well,
you have regions that are amenable to the growing of apples, and they grow the apples, and you ship the apples from those regions.
Okay, so this is the problem. Everyone jumped on it like a cash cow, and they're trying to grow it in every single state, and not realizing that's just not how farming's done.
Yeah, they knew the truth too. Okay, because look, when the price of isolate was at about $800 a kilo, that was literally breadline break even for the farmer at 800.
So the farmer's selling at 800.
The farmer needs to basically give his product away and end up with the isolate that comes out the end of it being able to be sold for about 800 to give him probably about $700, $650 per kilo for that isolate.
What is the extraction ratio? Meaning, like, how many kilograms are grown in this acre, and at the end, what do you end up with in terms of weight? But I know it's hard to tell because now it's gone from a solid to an oil.
Well, no, it's fairly set figures if you understand it. So 1,500 plants spread out at 5 feet spacing is about 4,000 square meters of space. When you cut them down, each plant weighs about maybe between about a pound in weight of flour, of dried flour from each plant, which is half a kilo of dry flour. So you've got about 750 kilos. So let's say between 600 and 800 kilos of dry flour
in that acre.
And let's say you didn't need to be so conscious of the THC concentration, and so you could let it get a bit hot, like I can here in Thailand. I can go up to 1% in the field. So I can allow my plants to get to 15% CBD easily, maybe even 20, which is the critical deciding factor on the volume of oil. Mm-hmm. So when I do the first crude extraction on that volume of material, I'm going to probably get 112 kilos of crude. Then I winterize my crude, take the oil and fat out, and probably go down to 80.
So you're looking
80 kilos.
Kind of like almost a 1 to 8 extraction.
Well, it gets worse. Then I distill it, and I'll probably end up with 60 kilos. And then even worse, if I drop it to isolate, I'll probably get 55 kilos of isolate, approximately.
Okay, so I think this is a good segue into the next topic, which is what is the difference between a high-end CBD product and the stuff you buy at a gas station?
The difference between a high-end CBD,
Like a very top-of-the-line CBD product and something that you can get cheap at a gas station. Because again, in the mushroom world, I can buy lion's mane mushroom from a supplier for $12 a kilo, and I can also buy it for $120. Now,
what's the difference in that case?
Extraction ratio. So what they'll do, I'll explain that. So I don't need to show this, whatever. So what they do is, for medical grade lion's mane, actually let's focus on reishi. For medical grade reishi, you should be taking a 20-to-1 ratio, which means I need 20 kilograms of dried mushroom reishi powder to turn it into 1 kilogram of powder. And to get to that point, there's a pretty simple process. It's mostly from like water and alcohol extraction. And then finally, what they're doing is they're just adding more water and using spray dryer machines to concentrate it. So they're taking that 20 and turning it into 1. That's going to cost you about $120 a kilogram buying from the farm or from the factory, basically. Now, if you just took the reishi, your flour, and you just turned that into a powder and it was 1-to-1, you can buy that for like $10 a kg. The problem is on the market, if you put both powders on the ground like this, you can barely tell the difference. One's going to be a little bit more darker, right? And the ones that are weaker are going to be a little bit more whiter. So I understand that because I'm involved in it. So that's kind of the question back to the CBD side and the THC side. How does the client, how do they know what they're purchasing, and what types of information should we be looking for on the bottle to determine, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Well, I think I'm not sure if you agree, but I'd say the first thing that should be cleared up and irritates me with this whole industry are people selling hemp oil.
Without specificity?
Well, let's just be clear. Hemp oil could be anything. It could be, hemp is just a plant.
I see what
it could be, it could be oil that's got CBD in it, or it could be hemp oil from the actual seed of the plant.
Right.
So if you squash the seeds of a hemp plant or a marijuana plant, they contain about 30% fat content. Makes a great oil, which is food grade, and we use it as a carrier oil for mixing and diluting lots of different CBD oils and things. But at the end of the day, it's a nutritional food supplement with 0 THC or CBD. 0. It never had it, and it never will. And yet there's people pretending that they're selling bottles of hemp oil for $20, $30, $50, whatever, misleading people into thinking that it's CBD. It's not. There's no CBD. So
we would even be misled in the lab receiving CBD bottles that were advertised the way you said.
Yeah.
They would even say 1,000 milligrams of hemp. And to an everyday passerby, 1,000 milligrams of hemp. And you'd get in, there'd be no CBD. So they're referring to the hemp, but deliberately not including the CBD on the label.
They're just tricking people.
It's a bit of smoke and mirrors there.
Well, CBD doesn't get you high, you see. So you would never know, really, if you actually, to be honest, took it, unless we took a blood sample and did some serology and had a little look.
It's another example of the onus being way too much on the consumer. At the moment.
We've just been duped, basically. The market's been completely duped. This is one of the reasons this is all tightening up now. And back to the COA becomes so important, because really the best thing you can do when you're looking at CBD is learn how much you need, and then look at the way in which you want to take it. And then you need to look for a manufacturer that has very specific contents instructions on how much CBD milligrams is in a bottle, verified with a COA. That is the key part. The number of milligrams and the number of drops in the bottle. So therefore you can work out, it should clearly tell you per dosage serving how many milligrams of CBD you've just about to ingest. An average human needs between 50 and 80 milligrams a day is an average dose for CBD. And you look at some of these bottles, again, 500 milligrams in 30 milliliters. You'd need about 15 to 20 drops. Just
the whole thing.
You may as well just drink it. Mm-hmm. And they're telling you to take a few drops a day. So you've got companies that don't know how to dose it, because if they did, they'd make. So if our products,
is that a concentration issue then of the product? And let's go back to your processing, and that's where I'm trying to put it together, because the way you explained your process, you get the flower. You explained about 3 different steps
Yeah.
of process, meaning are there companies that are skipping step 2 and 3 and selling 1?
No, you can't skip the steps to get to one, to get to the end. Well, it depends again.
To get that, to that isolate.
This is where there's more cheating. So if you make a very reliable oil, full spectrum oil, that comes out of a plant time after time the same, you can rely on that to put into your tincture bottles because you don't get variation, because you've controlled your growing and your genetics. Now, some companies just think, I can't be bothered to do that. So what I'll do, I'll buy isolate powder. I'll knock that down. I'll dissolve it in a carrier oil, like MCT or hemp oil, and then I'll sell that as CBD oil. But what you're actually doing is you're selling people, it's not full spectrum. There's no other added components in there, which, to be honest, the medical society think we need. What you have enabled yourself to do is to make a very, very accurately dosed product.
Okay, that part, you just lost me a little bit there. The part where you take your isolate crystal, essentially, and now you're saying the way they cheat it is they're adding it with hemp oils?
It would be like malt liquor and beer, right? So malt liquor is not beer. It's an emulation of beer.
Yeah,
right?
and like it's not, and we're not emulating anything. What we're doing is that isolate is still CBD. It's still the main product that was in the full spectrum oil that really should have been used to make the product. It's just that it's so concentrated, it's now nearly 100% pure, which is why it's a white crystal. Now, I can chemically weigh that out. So say I want a bottle with 1.5 grams of active ingredient in 30 milliliters. All I have to do is weigh out 1.5 grams of this isolate, put it in the bottle with the right amount of carrier oil, and it's bang on, plus minus 4% every time.
That's your product,
and
got it?
And no, but it's not necessarily the product you want to make, because you can buy isolate, as we've just said, as cheap as chips now, and you can make up these cheap tincture bottles that on the face of it are quite accurate. But actually, it's still a bit of crookery. People are describing, they then stick a little bit of terpenes and a few other things in and call it broad spectrum or full spectrum. And it's not.
It's not pure.
It's not full spectrum in that it's been taken all the way to an end product that's completely pure and then reconstituted into something that someone feels is beneficial.
So essentially, they're just diluting it.
It's not the real plant that we started with.
Yeah, I understand.
Like when we're talking about full spectrum, we're talking about the range of medicines that are in cannabis naturally.
Yes.
And when you talk about full spectrum oil, you're talking about an oil that mirrors that specific range of medicines in an oil form. And with isolate, you can artificially recreate that natural.
Yeah, so you can never go wrong. Basically, if you analyze some manufacturers' tincture bottles, they will be the same year in and year out because they're using chemically inert CBD isolate to make make up their product. They're not like us. They're not gone to the effort to make a full spectrum bottle that time after time is consistent and within standards.
So you're taking your isolate and you're putting this into, let's say, a tincture bottle. What is the carrier you're using of oil? Is that standardized?
No, again, not standardized, is it? I understand that there are many grades of hemp oil. There's lots of different seed varieties. So every time you cold press the oil out, if that was your choice of carrier oil, different. Olive oil is another choice.
Largely coconut, largely MCT oil.
But
MCT.
On the whole, medium chain triglyceride made from coconut.
Why is that MCT is the more popular oil, or you should be using that? Is there
chemical stability? It has the longest shelf life. Coconut oil and extra virgin coconut oil, 6 months shelf life, really.
So let's recap. I'm going to assume there's a certain level of, let's call like super medical grade, where the average person doesn't need, and that's going to be very expensive. I'm sure if we were to have a very high concentration in a single tincture, and maybe you only need a half a drop or a drop, whatever. That's not the point of my question. The point of my question is, what is the checklist of information you're looking for from a supplier beyond all that COA and certification information we were discussing, but more on the product itself that you're looking for, that you can justify that this is quality? Is that even possible?
I mean, I think that's a lot of that comes down to personal preference too, probably.
No, you get at that point, if you've got the COA and you trust in that part.
I'm focused not on the psychoactive or THC but purely on the CBD side for, let's say, headache, inflammation, like this. This is my focus. How do I know I'm getting the most potent product out there that's going to have the most benefits for me, and I'm not getting duped by some supplier that's diluting the product?
Well, I think looking for a full spectrum oil, isn't it, with a good COA from a reputable company.
And your only way to determine that is you need to look at the COA yourself and analyze that.
And look at the process that they used to derive that oil.
Yeah, I think that's
so. You need to ask: was your oil made from isolate that you reconstituted, or is this the first cut of full spectrum oil out of the machine?
Okay, and that's what I meant by step 2 and 3 that I said some companies can skip. That's kind of what brought me back to that question, because your final one was this crystallization process, but essentially you're talking about step 2. People could skip step 3.
You could skip step 3. I mean, I'm doing step 3 as well to make isolate. Contrary to what I just said about not making tinctures with it, because I don't believe in it, I do make certain other products with it. So it's the basis and starting point for all the water-soluble CBD products.
Correct.
You can't really make a water-soluble product actually technically with the oils. You can emulsify them, break them down, nano-emulsify them, but it's an oil over water emulsion.
But now you're talking about water-soluble crystals.
Yes.
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 Okay, and that actually is the same in the mushroom industry. The highest quality product are the water-soluble products, but they are fucking expensive. Very expensive. Like, I'm talking double the price of anything on the market. And the industry...
Smoke and mirrors.
Well, the problem in this industry is I can sell this product at $29.99, and it's a very good product. It's not medically graded for a cancer patient that actually has cancer. This is a preventative medicine. If you want to go to the cancer level stuff, you're paying 2 to 3 times the cost. I'm talking you'd be spending $60 a month on medicine.
It's interesting that doesn't happen in the CBD market.
Yeah, this market, because it's been so fucked up by cheap Charlies coming out and selling $12 bottles. It's out there. You can go buy a $12 bottle of Lion's Mane, no problem. But it's absolute garbage. It's sugar pills. So I guess that goes back to your side. That process of making it water-soluble crystals, this is what is driving up the cost.
It's not actually, no. I'll be completely honest with everyone. Just smoke and mirrors, to be honest. It's all bullshit. To make the water-soluble product, I take isolate. I dissolve it in some chemicals, in a carrier. And then I put an emulsifier in it. Equivalent, non-technical term, fairy liquid. I then put it through a piece of equipment that has a horn that makes a lot of noise, and this breaks up in a chamber as the oil's flowing through, breaks it all up into tiny little pieces, coats it together with the emulsifier, and then I put it through another machine that produces the water-soluble powder. Apart from the cost of the equipment, it's actually not much more. It costs nothing to really produce.
So why wouldn't people do that?
Well, we do it for only specific... It's not done to elevate the value of the product. It's done to elevate the number of possibilities of use of the product.
It gives the cannabinoid extra powers, basically. Like, naturally, THC is not soluble, particularly in water.
No.
So if you want to make a drink, you're going to make a water-soluble THC.
There you go. That's the use of it. Now, he's nailed it, and on the 2 fronts, actually. It's to make it soluble, to be able to put in a drink. Let's say you want to make a CBD beer.
Okay.
If you put distillate in it, it's just going to float to the top. It'll look a mess. It'll be awful. No one's going to want that. You make the water-soluble CBD, put that in the beer. Great, you've achieved a nice product. And at the same time, if you've nano-emulsified it, what that means is you've made it really small in size, the oil droplets, down to about 20 nanometers. And then they can be absorbed into the body really quickly. The bioavailability is much, much higher.
But it sounds, so that press you're using, is it adding heat? Is it destroying the enzymes destroying the potency instead of if you did it as let's say a cold press?
No, it doesn't break it, because what you're putting in is pure CBD. And so what it actually does is it just breaks up the molecular size of the droplet from, say, 100, 200 nanometers in size, a ball, a sphere, down to a 20 nanometer sphere. We're still not down to the atomic level yet. So no, we've not broken anything. And as Einstein said, you can neither destroy nor create matter.
Yes.
So it's in a cycle going around. It's just been made smaller and smaller.
And then then there are like microencapsulation where those small pieces, you would wrap them in a soluble.
And that's the next step. So yeah, you've nano emulsified it to a small thing, but it's not water soluble now. It's still just a little oil ball. Now you can get something like a lysosome, which is like a little carrier, like a football, with a water soluble outside and a fat loving in the middle core. So that grabs the little 20 nanometer ball of oil, sucks it into the middle, coats it in all these lovely tentacles that love water. And
at the molecular level.
At a molecular level.
Yes.
And that
so people aren't trying to visualize this.
So you're not dissolving.
Yeah, you don't have a little.
Yeah, it's not.
And that's what then allows your little ball of oil to dissolve into the water. The little heads, the hydrophilic heads sticking out of the lysosome, attached to the water molecule and are attracted to it with hydrogen bonding, which allows dissolution.
And at this level of understanding, like when you were doing your testing, did you have to be educated in that? Were you already educated in that? Or was it a requirement for a part of your job to understand that?
When I started, we didn't have a lot of microencapsulated oils. So when they first started coming in, we had this wave of people doing that. We thought that they were pure isolates. And we would test these isolates and they'd come back 20%. So we weren't penetrating that outer layer and reaching the CBD or THC inside. So
you have to break the lysosomal coats.
Right, the extraction wasn't working. So we were extracting based on it being an isolate, and it's not. So you're not technically dissolving the CBD in the water. You're suspending it in a water, and its friend is dissolving in the water, essentially, right?
But
You've got two partners.
I guess you put it through a gas chromatograph, though. It was still coming up. That was because that's going to burn.
Yeah, if you were doing a cannabis, like a potency test on gas chromatograph, we were using, for the bulk of our CBD samples, we were using liquid, and then some of the higher level samples we'd put on the mass spectrometer. But the methods that we had for extracting THC, we developed a new method. It was similar to the method we use for gummy bears, pulling THC out of gummy bears. We used for the microencapsulated oils. So you have an outer layer that you need to destroy to get into the THC and then analyze.
And again, jumping onto the potency and understanding the quality of your CBD product that you're purchasing. And I know we've talked a lot about the COAs, but beyond the COA testing for pesticides, specifically on the potency, what are you guys testing for, and what are the industry benchmarks that people should be trying to hit? And I think that goes more into the cannabinoids, flavonoids. Obviously, on the THC part, you need it less than 0.3. So let's talk about those. What do we call them? Metabolites at this stage?
In the lab, we just referred them as the active compounds.
Yeah, the active compounds. What active compounds are you testing for CBD? And what are the benchmarks you're trying to hit to make it, let's say, of a quality product?
Well, we had two classes. We didn't do flavonoids. We had the set of cannabinoids, and we had terpenoids.
Yeah, only some advanced researchers are looking at the flavonoids, to be honest with you, which is sad. But I think actually the answer to your question, there really isn't one, because what makes a quality product is what you were trying to achieve with the end product in that particular area of the production line. So, for example, crude oil, the first level of extraction from a plant. You would hope to end up with a nice, good quality, concentrated crude oil of, say, 40 to 50, 60% CBD concentration, free of as much wax and chlorophyll, so you don't have to post-process too much. That would be, if I got that at the end of my stage one, I'd be happy. So
is that measurable though at that
yes,
stage? Like analytically,
you can
absolutely. You can do testing to
you take the crude oil to the machine and you test it, and then the distillation process again. That's you've got expectations there, because in distillation, the process of what you're trying to do is basically purify to about 93.4% the cannabinoid in question, CBD, and remove everything else. So your objective, purify to at least 90%, and remove everything else. So you can remove a lot of pesticides, heavy metals. You can remove all the other minor cannabinoids, and you can produce them into separate glasses.
And can they be used for something else?
Yeah,
Obviously not the heavy metals. But
no, of course we collect the fractions. All the like making petrol with exactly the same process. Different temperatures and pressures, different fractions from the mixture come off, and you can collect them individually as you go, depending on how high tech your distillation system is. Yeah. So our main goal at the end of distillation is to end up with a high quality 90+% distillate. And then again, if you're making an isolate, your end goal would be a 99+% isolate, which you didn't have to wash too much and dissolve and waste product with. It was clean when examined with lab testing equipment of THC. It was,
and then that 99%, then the active compound you're testing is the cannabidiol.
Yeah,
that's what you're testing for.
Yeah, we're looking at,
and then you're looking at 99 plus. What other active compounds or what else is left there that is making up that 0.5% or whatnot?
Well, that's a very good question.
Well, I think key for everyday people to understand is that marijuana versus alcohol, in terms of the content of compounds, when you drink alcohol, you're drinking ethanol. You're taking one compound. Doesn't matter if you drink beer or wine. Marijuana has dozens of active compounds. And if you're talking particularly cannabinoids, you've got CBD, THC, CBN, CBD THCV. We tested for 11 or 12 in the last lab I was at, and they all have unique medical properties. So if it's key what James said about your intent in taking the product. If you're taking a product because you want to sleep better at night, you're going to want to target CBN, or you're going to want that product to have particular isolates that have particular medical properties. And that's what strains are. You have different strains, and they're composed of different terpene profiles, and they have different medical properties. So he's pulling off fractions. His intent is to get CBD, but he's pulling off compounds that are useful.
Well, the other thing
in the process.
You've got to remember that CBD, what will actually be left are other minor cannabinoids and flavonoids.
Very low concentration.
Under 1%, because a lot of these cannabinoids have got a very similar boiling temperature to each other. They're very similar. And in fact, to be honest, the worst one, this is why we produce isolate quite a lot, is to drop out the THC. Because THC and CBD have such a close boiling point, it's extremely difficult to separate the two of them. Chemically, they're almost exactly the same, except for a few chemical bonds. We won't go into their molecular structure.
You can go on YouTube and watch that. There's a lot.
Yeah, you go on YouTube and look at the
molecular structure,
and the carbon bond structure and everything. But you'll see that they're mirror copies of each other. It's just a difference in bond and a carboxyl group that causes all the problems. Mm-hmm. And they're almost impossible up till recently to separate. So distillation is our best option at first chance. But then if you want to go more than 90%, 99%, you've got to go into flash chromatography.
And I think probably at that point it's safe enough. Product is of quality.
Yeah, and herein this is your standards we were talking about, and this is why they cost so much money. That's where we end it for the consumer at 99%, because I can then recrystallize it and I'll get it to 99.3.
There's a certain threshold where, it's good enough.
I have to spend triple the money to get the extra 0.5%, which is what would be required to make it API, and a pharmaceutical ingredient, which is a different product to the standard isolate.
And then at that point, are you able to patent that product or no? Okay. Same with mushroom, because it's all natural.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump back when you were talking about the benefits of other cannabinoids within, and that's the right way that explaining it, right? Mm-hmm. CBN. You take CBN for, let's say, sleep. So why is the whole industry more focused on CBD? Is it simply because of the trend, or is it more to do with the benefit of CBD is more valuable to the mass public than the benefits of CBN?
Yeah, I think CBD is a more palatable way to introduce the general public to marijuana. I think we have decades of stigma and things to overcome, and I think CBD is doing a good job of providing medical alleviation for certain things without psychological effects. I think this is just the way that cannabinoids are sweeping through culture and becoming a normal part of everyday life. We haven't had everyday conversations about cannabinoids prior to 10 years ago. We had everyday conversations about consumption of alcohol. We have ritual behaviors for alcohol and caffeine and stuff. I think this just comes down to how much the consumer knows, and it's not a big part of our culture anywhere really in the world. So we have all these consumer education, check your COA, and it's just for the consumer to defend themselves in this brand new Wild West environment, I think CBN will prove to be a useful product for a wide range of people, but it's not penetrated yet.
Well, look, I mean, there's two areas to all these new cannabinoids. They're all new and unresearched. So we actually know nothing about really how they're going to play out in the long run and in which ones we would need, in which concentrations. If Parkinson's, do we want mainly CBD, this much THC, and a little bit of something else?
Meaning, so people understand, in terms of research in which it's never even, we haven't gone to that human clinical trial phases yet of, let's say, testing CBN. So just from, is it more like bro science at this stage where it's CBN, it helps with sleep, or is there still a little bit of research behind that?
No, there's two ways this is going. There's serious research with all the cannabinoids. So we're looking into Delta 8, Delta 10, THC V, CBD V, all sorts of other cannabinoids now that are proving to have preliminary what looks like great medical potential. But then you've also got the recreational stoners. Delta 8 is just a legal form of Delta 9, less potent.
What do you mean? Sorry, I'm not aware of that term.
Well, so THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is Delta 9. The Delta 9 comes from the position of the carbon bond.
Okay.
It's in position 9. It's quite boring. Position 8, it's exactly the same shape, but the bond's in position 8.
It's just the way the molecular structure comes up,
one
or the tail
bond
turns.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching this yesterday. I'm like, that's enough.
So you put the bond in position 8.
Yeah.
It's not. You've now got a psychoactive drug that the FDA don't control.
Right,
we only control Delta 9. So all the time we create these new psychoactive drugs, which recreational stoners like because they cannot get into trouble. So currently we've got Delta 8 and Delta 10, 2 THC variants, neither of which are controlled by any governments. So you can legally buy them. And do you know what? You can make Delta 8, you get CBD Isolate. And I won't go through the SOP now because it's worth a lot of money and I can charge people for that. But I can make THC Delta 8, Delta 9 and 10 from CBD in a backwards conversion because we've got so complex now with this. It's just chemistry.
Do you mean essentially reverse engineering?
Yeah, I can reverse engineer. I can make CBD into THC.
Is that recording? Yeah. Okay, never mind. We're back. I wasn't sure if green or red was recording. Oh, we're doing good. It's okay. So we're still recording. We're good. Okay. So sorry, I might have cut you off there.
No, that's fine.
Continue on that.
So what was that? Where was
Delta 9, Delta 10, and reverse engineering.
Yeah, these into conversions.
So before that goes over my head, do you mean you're kind of just taking your CBD isolate and reverse engineering from there to make a different derivative?
Yeah, exactly that.
And how would you do that chemically? Oh, that's the SOP.
Listen,
okay.
Now I can give you.
I got you. Okay, I got it.
In brief, you basically use what's called a Lewis acid. Anyone who wants to go out there and start Googling this.
Yeah, good luck.
You add a Lewis acid to your CBD mixture, and you then do some stuff with temperature and pressure in a reaction vessel for a certain amount of time. And the longer the reaction goes on, you basically just change the position of the bond in the CBD. So
nobody has this reaction vessel in their home. But basically, essentially what you're saying is people could go out, buy CBD, reverse engineer it, and get high.
Yeah.
But obviously...
Actually, be quite easy. I think there's a company in America, Delta Separations, or was it Extract Labs? One of them. They're doing a Delta 8 conversion reactor with all the kit. SOP, full instructions, totally legal to buy.
How much is this kit?
That's $45,000.
Oh, yeah, so
$45,000 to you. You can pump some isolate into that, and you can have you get enough THC out.
So
the
nobody's
back end
doing
of
that
to get a football field.
So
today.
get maybe do a GoFundMe or something, and you can just buy all the CBD and then you have access to THC.
Fancy little lab in here.
There you go. And were you aware of this information as well? Because on your side, it's more the formulation and the testing side is.
You mean the interconversion of cannabinoids? We don't see that or test that. That's fringe. But like in receiving products from producers, we kind of get a survey of everything that's all the competitors are making on the market. So we have a generally good idea about the technologies that are coming into play in the products. We don't make the products.
Yeah.
But yeah, Delta 8's great.
But it's just two ways, you know. Some people are picking up the new science and just getting stoned on it and using it for the wrong reason. And to be honest with you, then obviously we're trying to take it down the medical route, and we're naturally investigating. We've got lots of hospitals here, for example. Lots and lots of beds, professors. They're very keen to do clinical research on all the cannabinoids so that we can try and start working out which ones in which concentrations together.
Okay, so now you're sparking my interest, or I have an idea, and maybe I'm completely wrong. So could you not? Now it's illegal to sell. It's illegal to import, obviously, THC into the U.S. Correct? If you were to take CBD from Thailand, can you import CBD into the U.S.?
Sure.
And then convert it into THC in the U.S.?
Sure.
You're in possession of THC and you're going to jail.
Not
unless you have a license.
No, I mean,
own it.
if you have the license in the U.S., the problem is I cannot. So did I touch upon some business plan there?
You could do that if it's not expensive.
You can make a kilo of Delta 9 THC distillate's worth $5,000-$6,000, and you can make that from $500 of isolate. Yeah,
so that's my point, because that's the loophole.
Well, it's not just as simple as that. You have to have the licensed premises to do that conversion, because what you're going to end up with when you make Delta 8 from CBD, you're going to end up with THC Delta 9 in the mix, which you're going to need to remediate and take out. Now, Delta 8 and Delta 9 are even more similar molecularly and stoichiometry-wise.
But you can still do that at a machine in the US.
Can still do it in a machine, is the point. You can still clean it up.
So now you're fixing the labor and cost problem by doing it in Southeast Asia. You're shipping over the CBD because now it's legalized for import, and then you're reverse engineering it in the US back into a medical product.
Or if you don't want to be bothered to do all of that, we can just impregnate the correct genetics into a yeast molecule to grow CBD, Delta 9, Delta 8, and you can just grow it in a fermentation reactor, which is what we're going to do pharmaceutically in the future, and we probably won't touch a plant. There'll be no plants.
It'll be synthetic, essentially. Well, it's yeast-based.
It's not synthetic, kind of. I mean, we're taking the real gene that made the end molecule, which is the same however you look at it, and we're just going to get yeast to make it. I mean, where do you think all our vitamin C comes from?
Yeah, so
it doesn't come out of oranges.
You're not jeopardizing the molecular structure.
No. All we're doing that fanaticists would argue about at the moment is, it's not entourage effect, because as we've been pointing out, you're stripping everything out. You're only producing one chemical at a time. But my vision, we will have different reactors to produce all the cannabinoids. Maybe when we work out what treatment is needed for a specific disease, it's 4 cannabinoids plus this. So you make those in a reactor.
Yeah. Because
you can make them constantly, low cost, no electric. Why do you want to destroy the planet with water and electric usage to grow plants when you can do it in a massive stainless steel reactor in a pharma building? That's where it will be going. It's going now, I can tell.
How many years down that you see that 10
It's happening already now.
Yeah, because I'm on the mushroom side. That's the argument now in the kind of the mushroom world. There's a certain non-essential amino acid that is very prevalent in oyster mushrooms. It's called ergothioneine.
Yeah.
And ergothioneine is there's actual clinical human trials being done at the University of Singapore, I believe by the Dr. Robert Beelman, if I'm correct. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I believe it's him. I actually had a conversation with him, but I've talked to a bunch of doctors, so it's always hard to remember their names. But anyways, that's the conclusion they've come to, because it's not sustainable to harvest, thousands and thousands of kilos of oyster mushrooms to extract the ergothioneine, and what they're doing is they're doing it synthetically now in China off yeast.
Yeah, so exactly. And there's many ways to synthesize amino acids.
Yes.
It's actually quite an advanced technology now that we've got. So again, much more beneficial, and you end up with a cleaner preparation. It's more stable. Yeah.
And would this eliminate then the processing of using things like we were discussing earlier, like Freon and you were saying propane and and ethanol?
Well,
do you still need to use those extraction processes when you're doing this fermentation?
Yeah, sure, because you've got a yeast cell. So you have to separate the yeast cell from the active ingredient that's made. So there's still a separation that's required, yeah. How exactly technically that would be carried out, I couldn't let on at the moment. But
what do you think would be the most cleanest, beneficial, and most beneficial way for us to absorb that in terms of the product you're using to separate those molecules? Is it going to be ethanol? Is it going to be butane? Is it not propane? I don't think, but Freon.
You would use butane, propane. It picks up THC, and it's a great extraction capability for making a full spectrum oil. That's why actually it's the purest form of extraction. Freon, butane, propane. CO2 and ethanol cause damage to the full spectrum capacity of the plant. But in the instance of extracting from a yeast cell, you're only extracting the THC or the CBD. So there's nothing else you need to worry about being destroyed. So all you want is a solvent selective for THC, not for the yeast, that will extract that. So you could potentially use, you've just got pros and cons then. Alcohol extraction would work great, but you've got to use pure virgin alcohol of a specific grade and remove all the solvent. Solvent removals generically, I mean, it's an ongoing headache in the cannabis world. People get freaked out about solvent residue. CO2 would be the easiest, cleanest way to whip that out of you. I guess you would freeze dry it. You could freeze dry the whole up and then just run it through a CO2 reactor, and that would extract the pure THC, leaving behind then just filter it.
And which way, what are the reasons why people would use one or the other? Is it because of cost?
Yeah, cost and perceived safety, and legislation. So, I mean, in Japan, you could buy CBD only made from CO2 extraction of industrial hemp.
And is that because it's controlled by maybe those markets making those decisions, and there's lobbyists that have kind of pushed for that? Yeah,
they believe and they perceive that that's the only way to produce a clean oil that's acceptable in their society. And so we've got to meet their standards.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's not many countries in the world that just want CO2 only. Generally, people want CO2 oil anyway, as opposed to ethanol extracted, because they perceive it to be a better quality. It's worth more money.
And what did you see, Nicolas, primarily in your lab? Were you able? From the testing, were you able to see what type of extraction processes they were using?
You could assume, but it comes in and we know what it was extracted with. In Colorado, we saw more butane, propane. In Colorado, we saw more boutique extracts too. So in Florida, we saw much more CO2.
What is boutique extracts? What does that mean?
There's many ways to extract THC from a plant. One boutique extract would be live resin, for example. So you're going to flash freeze the plants, and you're going to extract essentially from fresh marijuana, not dried marijuana. So there are levels of extracts. So like you had said, there are 3 steps before you do to get to isolate. They're all extracts. You can have a crude extract. You can have a highly refined extract. You can have an extract where you want it to be whipped into a kind of buttery texture. It's all preference, really. And Colorado has a really advanced extracts market with a lot of variety.
So would they be using like essentially refrigeration technology for freeze drying, to the point where they've freeze dried it so much that it
no, that's not
basically
the point. That's not the
turns
point.
to powder.
That's not the point of freezing it. Just to what he was explaining is live resin. You want to capture the true essence of the plant as quickly as possible. So much like the rose industry making perfume in like Hungary, for example, when they pick, that's where the Freon system comes from. I was describing to you earlier, that captures the true essence of the plant. what you do is you dunk it in liquid nitrogen or freeze it, the plant in a freezer, -86 freezer, and as quickly as you can after you cut it. And that stores all the everything fresh. Then you put it in the machine and extract it whilst it's frozen. And so you're not freeze drying it, you just crush it up when it's frozen, and it will break up into little bits, put that into the machine and extract it. And what comes out the other end, depending on what you use to extract it, will be what he's called an extract. So these little boutique extractions, people love dabbing.
Okay.
I mean, it's delicious, this live resin. That's the point.
And this is for the THC industry, because it's more for the flavor.
Yeah,
you're trying to.
I've seen it in CBD now too.
Yeah, there's
but
CBD too.
Oh, because you're trying to grab the essence of that plant.
It's about the terpenes.
Yes,
Okay.
it's all about and it's much stronger. So you know these three processes I told you about. If you butane propane extract THC oil, it'll come out 80% plus strength if you do it right. And it needs no further processing because it's got no waxes, chlorophyll, nothing bad. It's just got the terpenes, the flavonoids, and the THC and the cannabinoids come out. And depending on the temperature and pressure that they do this process will depend upon the final product. So they might be making terp sauce or crumble, which has...
What would that be used for?
Well, like a terp sauce is very terpene rich. So what that basically pulls out all the terpenes, and you get like a nice kind of a runny yellow product.
A sugary water.
Yeah, and it's great in vape cartridges. Amazing.
Okay, so
Got
this
a
is
really
more
nice-
for cartridges and
Yeah,
dabs.
and then the crumble looks like literally the top of an apple crumble,
Okay.
but obviously yellow, waxy, and that is great for putting on a dab rig. and
Were you
smoking.
dealing with products like this as well, like beyond just a basic, isolate powder and oil? You're dealing with like these more. Are they considered more like a specialist product?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More people would buy. I mean, they're more expensive too. Like when I was there, a gram of live resin was I think $70 or $80 versus you can $30 for a regular cartridge.
Oh, wow.
So it's an experience you're going for.
Yeah.
But we would see everything. I mean, and there's really no reason you can tell someone that a live resin is not a medical product if they're using THC for medicinal purposes. If they choose to take that in a live resin format in Colorado, that's the way it is currently. And you have people who claim they only receive medical benefits from smoking the flower. So you have private individuals that have these legacy licenses where they can grow over 100 plants because the concentration of their daily medical dosage is so high, and they refuse to do anything but smoke flower. So, I mean, just speaking to, you can say, oh, this is just a kind of a THC recreational product, live resin, but there are people that use live resin as a medical relief product too. It smells great, and it's when you buy Advil, you buy Advil in a pill. There's no Advil cookie. There's no Advil Coca-Cola
smoke or injection.
Well,
Right.
you can stick it in a volcano, dab in a volcano bag, and if you needed it medically, and you wouldn't get too much of an issue with the irritation on your lungs inhaling it from a bag if you vaped it through a bag system. That same person might not want to smoke flower. It's a lot more harsh smoking
It's more
flower.
personal preference as well.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. The dose is much higher. One little hit on a dab rig is equivalent to a good couple of joints.
And okay, let's. We've talked a lot about the CBD, and your expertise is more on the THC. So right before we jump into that, I wanted to clarify like the definition of terpenes, because we've mentioned it a lot on this episode. Can you explain terpenes, and when you were measuring for those active compounds, what were those benchmarks? What were you looking for? What are the purpose and benefits of terpenes as well?
So terpenes are a component of the marijuana plant, but they're also throughout nature. They're in fruits. They're in pepper. They flavor and the marijuana and the taste. Research has shown that various terpenes have medical benefits too. You could see as the terpenes as being a part of the entourage effect.
Kind of the holistic approach to the product itself.
I mean, aromatherapy has relied on terpenes for a long time, I think.
So there's no real like direct benchmark measurement on a terpene itself.
Well, the terpenes will define a strain. too,
Okay.
along with the cannabinoids. So if you have a blue dream with a flavor profile and you have a purple haze with a different flavor profile, that's going to be the fingerprint of the terpene. And like we said earlier, a lot of labs will not test terpenes because the strain has a stabilized genetics where you can tell what the terpenes will be. The labs I've worked in have tested
And it's
anyway.
expensive terpene profiling.
Could you use the analogy of like applying that to the color spectrum? Meaning like as you put your finger on different, let's say Pantone colors, which are defined by a number, is a terpene flavor defined by a specific thumbprint or fingerprint as like a switch of here or there is a different flavor?
It's a molecule.
It's a molecule, that's it.
It's a hydrocarbon-based molecule that is that can be fairly complex. There's different types of terpenes, but in essence, they're just chemicals. They're molecules that are produced naturally in various, like you said, plants. Like you have limonene from a lemon, pinene. The pinene molecule is what makes pine trees have that particular pine smell. All of these terpenes are present to some degree in a cannabis plant in varying quantities depending on what the strain is. So we all have, if you go to leafy.com, you'll see for every strain there's a very defined terpene profile for a known cannabis strain. That would be what you would expect to find if you analysed any strain. And all that is a list of exact chemicals that make up that plant. Okay. So they're just molecules. Simply, they're molecules.
So from the growing side, from the seed itself, is it require genetic seed modification to be able to grow a certain flavor of a marijuana plant, or is there something else going on in the process? Like, and again, I don't understand that part. Like, are you adding lemon to the soil, or is it purely the seed that's allowing it to get that flavor of what you're looking to get?
It's the genetics. So as we just said, look, each strain has a set of genes that code for all the chemicals that it's going to produce in its life.
Okay.
And they're set in the genetic genome of that plant. So some strains have genes that express more, for example, pinene. What we don't really know at the moment is how the expression of these genes occurs. So why would you have more pinene expression than, say, limonene in one strain? So the technical biosynthesis pathways at the back end we're now looking into. But for sure, each strain has a different genetic composition, which codes for a different varying amount of terpenes. So like humans, if you get two different people from two different races and you breed them, you get genetically you get the same thing, a human, but it could have different phenotypic expression.
So it's a lot of crossbreeding over a period of time to get these plants to what
so
they
we
are.
can, if we want plants like Jack Herer that are predominantly, the pinene taste, a lot of people like that, you can breed pinene specific plants together, or you might want to create something with a bit of lemon and the pinene. This is how all the strains come about now. We're so specific. We know that this strain tastes like this, that one tastes like strawberry. You put them together, you got custard strawberry now.
Okay.
Yeah.
The same way that humans created 100 dog breeds that are all specialized.
Yeah.
You know, we've selectively bred marijuana.
Same process as
Right.
dog breeding. It's the same process as breeding anything we've bred.
Do we see any issues with that in terms of not just the potency, but the safety of smoking crossbred marijuana, or is it just evolving and it's no problem?
Look, there's some issues in it. You know, I'm a bit relaxed as a person, generally speaking. I'm not too much of a control freak with humans and our society. At the end of the day, look, naturally, weed out in the in the hills was on an average 10, 15%, quite weak THC concentration. There's landrace strains, of course, that go up much higher. But on an average, the majority of society has been smoking bushweed around 10, 15%. So there's not been many cases, for example, of psychoses, accidents with machinery and cars. We all know if you get pissed, you're going to have an accident if you go and drive. You don't do it. Well, it's the same with weed. Why did we all think you could smoke doobies and then go and drive or fly an aeroplane? No, you can't. You can't do that.
So maybe it's the same as like drinking a beer and smashing a bottle of whiskey.
It's exactly the same. But but what we've done now is we've replaced. There's not many beers available now. We're only giving the whiskey option.
Ah.
So like most flour is like 20 to 30% now. It's pretty pokey. And then these pokey extracts, they're double that and more. So
I remember talking to scientists in the lab saying, I wish that there would be people who would come out and their brand identity was, this is not 20%.
There are companies now that are breeding low concentration. In Israel, you have a Greenbook system for cannabis. So it's called T number and then C number. The T stands for the concentration of THC, the C for CBD. So they have, for example, T10, C0, 10% THC, 0 CBD. T10, C5, T10, C10. They have, but then they stop at 20. Anything over T20 is basically disallowed because there's no place for it.
It can lead to things such as psychosis, and you shouldn't be operating machinery on this stuff.
And the bottom line is, we only all love it, if we're honest out there, guys, to get really stoned. Actually, what we've shown is there's no medical purpose for a weed over 20%.
As you increase, there's a that's the threshold.
Yeah, you 20%, you're at the threshold.
Is there any danger if you were to hit like 50, 60 plus? Like, is there danger from a mental standpoint?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've regularly smoked distillate rubbed on a joint, which is 90% THC along a joint. So, I mean, it's only through the number of years that I've been using THC products that I've developed a resistance. And I'm just maybe I'm lucky that I don't fall susceptible to psychoses and certain problems, because I know people that have done.
Same.
So it's definitely, I can't stand there and say it's harmless. It's not going to kill you, and it's not going to permanently damage you. THC. You might, if you get into a psychosis, decide I got to quit smoking the weed, and just have to stop. That'll be the worst thing that happens.
So is it because of the industry is so new and it's, I mean, even I've never thought of it in that way, in which it's no different than going into the liquor store and buying a beer or a bottle of whiskey. And I think it's everyone was having a pissing contest 10, 15 years ago. Like, how strong is your stuff? Well, I got the Kush. Here's his Bush. But maybe they have to take a step back and say, like, yeah, maybe you don't need to smoke the Kush, that top of the top, your Purple Haze, whatever, because that's kind of what we heard. Especially me growing up, you don't need that and to go to class, to go to work. Maybe there's something different for you.
There is, and there's a lot of people selling different products now. Most of my friends can't touch half the stuff I produce.
I can't.
It's way too
strong. I don't even smoke weed anymore.
It's way too strong. They just can't. One little look at the stuff and they want to go to bed.
I'll smoke very often, and literally I'll have one hit and I'm high for like hours. But like when I was 15, 16, living in Canada, I probably smoked like 3 times a day.
I met a lot of people that have gotten, like, they used to smoke 15, 16, and then they report getting to 25, 30.
25.
And it makes them panic, and they don't enjoy it so much.
I would get not panic attacks, but I just get a lot of, if I did it in this room, a lot of anxiety. Yeah. But if I were to do it and go surfing, it's great because, you know, you're so free, you're so present in the moment, because surfing you have to be because of the waves are coming. But if I was to smoke it here and like lay around, then there's so many distractions and things going on, and then the mind can wander.
Well, and then you've got children. The actual concern for me is, you know, as an adult, you can choose to get yourself in that position and just go and have a few hours sleep, get over it. But as a child, I mean, I remember smoking joints around the back of the car park at school at lunchtime, and thank the Lord, it wasn't like some of this awesome skunk stuff and these concentrates that we're selling now, because I probably wouldn't have left. I would have left school.
It would have been too powerful.
I'd have been too stoned.
Yeah.
I'd have been carted off by mum and dad back home.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have got anywhere. Seriously, it's not a joke actually for the kids, you know, because it is readily available everywhere.
Yeah, I've had that argument, especially with marijuana and THC, is that you do need to regulate it, and not anyone should be able to walk in and just because you say you have sleeping disorder. And the reason that is, if you have psychosis in your family, especially things like schizophrenia, you're more prone to get that. And I've seen people just from smoking weed turn into absolute psychopaths. Not in the way where they're running around stabbing someone, but just like extremely distant and delusional.
A bit polar-like.
A little bipolar, a little lost in their world, and like just their thought process, or they're not on the planet anymore. And they need to take a step back.
Well, and then you have other issues people don't even realize might not be important, but you don't dream, do you?
Yeah, we were discussing
We were
that as
chatting
well.
that,
Yeah,
like lack of
our REM sleep.
other things it affects in your body, because it does have long-term effects, whether they are good or bad.
Yeah, apparently you don't get proper REM sleep when you smoke. And I've heard a lot of friends as well, when they stop smoking, their dreams are so vivid after and very intense.
Likewise, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if a lot of smokers that have given up smoking think back and actually realize and think about that, they'll probably think, oh yeah, I remember that.
Because I think what you're...
The dreams came
There you
back.
go.
I could.
Wow. What I think you're doing a lot of, like with these botanicals, and they're being used for sleep. Reishi does this as well. Yes, it's used for sleep and it can help for sleep, but I think you're just sedating yourself in a more natural way.
Well, that's
Quasi-sleep.
not.
Yes,
that's not
quasi-sleep.
achieving. That's not achieving a good sleep.
It's not
position.
achieving a good sleep.
No. I mean, yeah.
Okay, so let's jump ahead. How far are we on time?
We have 1 hour and 52 minutes.
Okay, I want to. It's 4:45. Are you guys okay? Are you hard stop? Okay. I want to talk. Let's chat about like more on the THC industry. I think we've got quite scientific on everything, especially on the COAs and mostly on the CBD. But let's jump into the THC and talk more about like legislation in the US, understanding like specifically of THC content, 10%, 0.3% for CBD. What is legalized in the US, what is legalized in Thailand, and what needs to happen so things can actually start moving forward. And to be honest, I don't know a lot of that information. So let's start on the US side. When you were testing for THC in Colorado and Florida, what were the restrictions? What were you testing for? And just chat a little bit about that.
Not much difference with THC across those states. We tested for more cannabinoids in Florida. But the regulations in Florida were based on the California regulations, which were known as being the strictest in the United States. So we had more I think we tested for 7 pesticides in Colorado. We tested for almost 60 in Florida, and we saw more in Florida down to the tropical climate, I think, as well.
But I mean, of the product you're testing, is there a certain level of THC available in the product that you cannot exceed due to regulation?
No, when Florida started, there was, but now there's none.
So technically, someone could have 100% THC product. This is legal.
There is 100% THC. I mean, close to 100%.
Okay, see, I wasn't, because it's
not
not
in a flower, but I mean.
So, and
As
that's
an
all across US.
Where it's legal, most.
Okay, so this is the issue. It's not federally, it's decriminalized in certain states. But people are allowed to have medical clinics. You need a license, if I'm correct, to be able to sell from your medical clinic THC. Which states, and maybe don't name them all, is it illegal to sell THC in? Texas would be one, I'm assuming.
Texas is still illegal.
Texas is still illegal.
So there's a lot of states in the South that are illegal. I think if you looked at a map, it would mostly be green on the West Coast, and then you might have some new, I think like Massachusetts was one of the earliest.
Areas like Maine.
Maine, I think, has it. Alaska.
Maine has it now.
I think Maine.
Legalized?
Recently.
Legalized.
I'm getting a tingle recently. It's just
Yeah.
a memory. I might be wrong.
There's so many I lose track now.
Right.
But many states, like let's say Missouri, Kansas, is this still illegal in these states?
Yeah, and culturally, they're not as amenable to it in terms of recreation. I think most people in America, you could convince medical is a good idea now. 10 years ago, I don't know if that would be even true.
So what's it going to take for it to become federally legalized, not decriminalized? What is that? I don't know. What is going to be the breaking point?
Ready. I think America's ready, personally. I don't think that is something that would stop them. I don't think senators are going to get thousands of letters from people angry that medical marijuana is going to be legalized. Whatever is stopping it, it's happening in Washington.
I think people are angry that they're not sourcing it out. The opposite. Because there's so many of the American population now that are for it. Mm-hmm. I think if they did a proper vote, should we finally nail this federally and decriminalize it? I think most people would say yes. I think it'd be a landslide. Yep. I think politicians are just using it to play around for their own benefit.
It's got to be economic lobbying.
Could it also be like there's economically these, let's say, senators or lobbyists, they're trying to structure the environment to see who gets what piece of pie before we sign off?
That's a good
Like, for
assumption.
example, you can't just sign it today and it's going to be a free-for-all tomorrow, right?
No.
You kind of have to set that up before, right?
And that therein lies, the problem with non-repudiation, making sure that federally they can rely on data from the industry. So up till now, I don't think that they've had there's been no centralized government system to use, and I don't think that they have trusted individual solutions up till now enough. Not by a long way. Canada seemed to have gone with it anyway.
Canada's doing awesome.
Canada's
awesome
just
job.
doing awesome from it. I mean, you just increase your tax inspections, and I'm sure that there's ways that governments can mitigate that risk. Must
Yeah.
be. Otherwise, why else have they not decriminalised it? Lack of medicine.
Yeah, I would,
And
yeah,
lack of research.
yeah. I mean, when I look at the difference in economic structure between each state, and the only thing that would cause that is in the process of the legislation coming into being, that politicians wanted to get in on it. So in Colorado, we have multiple thousand licenses to grow marijuana. It's not that hard to get one. But in Florida, it was a vertically integrated, what some people call a cartel system.
It literally is cartel
Yeah.
integrated. You if you're not in the know, you didn't get a license.
Okay, so what do you mean by that? There's certain people handing out these licenses. Unless you're in bed with them, you ain't getting one.
Precisely.
Are there examples of that without naming names, or like how
Well,
can you
just the fact that it was limited to 7 or 8 licenses in Florida.
Okay, so that makes more sense of it.
Yeah.
Tiny number of licenses. Yeah.
So to turn this back to the CBD, THC, if your product goes over 1%, it has to be medical, and I could be completely wrong. I'm just trying to understand that. But on CBD, you don't need a medical license, or you don't need to go to a medical facility to purchase CBD, but it has to be under 0.3 THC.
The end product in Thailand has to actually be under 0.2.
And I'm in US as well.
US 0.3.
0.3, and then again, you can buy your gas station CBD if you want, but you can't buy your gas station THC.
No, Delta 8 now, but not THC.
Okay.
No, Delta, yeah. You can buy Delta 8. All CBD products in Thailand under 0.2 for commercial sale. But you're allowed, there's a big difference between America for Thailand. In the field in America, you still have to be under 0.0.
Sure, Mike.
You have to be under 0.3, 0.2 still. No, sorry, 0.3.
For your CBD or THC product.
For the actual plant in the
flower
field.
itself.
So the feds will come and test 27 plants in a field, and if one of those plants goes over 0.3% THC, they'll come and burn the whole field.
Isn't that quite low when you're talking about products that
Amazingly low, which is why these high CBD genetics that they're growing are not reaching maturation. On a plant that takes, say, 10 weeks to flower, every week they will have to be doing a COA on the flower from the field to check where they sit with the THC.
We're talking about Thailand.
Well, we'll come to the difference.
So
here, that's the America situation. Here in Thailand,
So okay, before we jump to Thailand, so you're saying that the flower in US cannot be over 0.3.
No, cannot.
So then how are they hitting levels of 10-20% on the THC when you're getting it medically?
well, the THC. This is a CBD plant we're looking at here.
Okay, so
Not a
that's what
THC.
we need to understand. They're two different plants
Two
completely.
different plants.
One's hemp,
And one's hemp or hemp CBD,
okay,
and the other is THC,
marijuana plant.
marijuana.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is important for people to understand that
It's very
the
hard to get
CBD and the marijuana plant, they're completely different.
Yeah, I mean, if we just explain this to be very, very clear, because this is such an area of confusion.
Yes.
We have one plant, it's called Cannabis sativa. Now, that one plant can either produce CBD or THC or a mixture of the two. We have bred them to go to either extremes, and the same plant make just THC and no CBD. Or we've made them make just CBD and no THC, or we've made them make a variety of ratio of the two. Now, if we're looking at CBD products, we've gone to the right. We just want the cannabis sativa, the same plant that could make ganja, but that just makes the CBD. Now, what makes the government call it acceptable hemp and not MJ is being under 0.3% THC.
Which is an arbitrary level. Anyway.
It's just an arbitrary level that they've set. But
Well, why did they set it at that? Is there any reason for that? Or
they think that it's not at that lower concentration. There is virtually no psychoactive effects on a human being. Literally nothing at all. It's not worth worrying
I had
about.
heard that it actually kind of got there was a Canadian paper written 40 years ago that casually mentioned 0.3, and it was pulled in the legislation from that, but it was never a serious study.
More than likely, I could almost put money on it that there was no scientific research done to show at what concentration level impairment begins. If you can, I've not seen that.
Right.
I'd be interested. If not, maybe we should do some. But like most things, just some more bullshit was flouted, and I guess they probably thought that looks low. It's acceptable. But anyway, they were about right. You can't get high at 0.3, but it's still, an airline pilot couldn't take that. But looking back to the farmer in the field, so every week he's got to check that if the weather conditions change where he's growing his CBD hemp, like you say, it gets really hot, that can make the genetics of the plant throw wobbly and actually start producing THC as like an ancient like gene expression comes out. Even though that the plant shouldn't be doing it, it does. And it starts creeping up every day, the THC concentration. So the farmer has to check it all the time.
that could be from humidity.
We're not really
sun,
sure.
Water, whatever.
Various stressors. Yeah. Stress the plant out. And we're not 100% what they are. We've got some ideas what kind of makes spikes happen. But the long and the short of it is, if he might have a plant that in an indoor environment with aircon, LED lighting, everything micro-controlled and not changing, I could get that plant to 20% CBD and keep it under 0.3, no problem, because there's no variation in environment.
But that's where it gets quite expensive to produce in a controlled environment.
It does. But so outdoors, your farmer's at the risk of the environment changing. That's why every week he's measuring THC, and most of them have to cut the field when the CBD level reaches, say, 12%, 10%. It never reaches its maximum. They might cut it at 6 weeks. See, when the cannabis plant grows, CBD is produced first. Mm-hmm. The THC isn't produced in the plant until the end of the growing part.
To the budding.
Or
the flower.
The flower starts early on and matures through an 8 to 10 week cycle. As that flower's going week 1, week 2, it's mainly just making CBD. As we said, THC comes from the molecule CBD. It's a precursor in the plant. There's an enzyme that acts on CBD to convert it into a range of other chemicals that goes to THC. That's where the THC comes from. That's why you don't get THC first in the plant, because it's actually synthesized from the CBD that's made first. But so towards the end of the plant's flowering cycle, can all go wrong, and the THC level goes up. Poor farmer has to lose the whole field of crop at $20,000 an acre because the THC went up too much. He wasn't even allowed to go above 0.3. Now
this is in the U.S. And
this is in the US, and it's a weird one because he's going to take those plants to an extraction lab and extract it where the THC would go, even if it was 0.3 and he hadn't destroyed the crop. I now put it through first level extraction. The THC concentration in the crude oil will now be 2.5–3%.
So if I'm a farmer, you wouldn't even take the risk of starting that.
Well, you've got it's an ugly issue to have to risk. You know, am I going to have to destroy my field? Watch the feds come in with fire burners and burn the lot. See, now here in Thailand, when they were setting the laws, they asked for advice on this here, the government. They said, how should we do it? So we all said to them, listen, don't do what America did. Set it at 1%. Switzerland did this. And the reasoning was quite simple. You give us a license to grow the CBD plants and we take them to a lab facility and we extract the oil, which concentrates the THC. We then remediate and take the THC out with all our expensive equipment. We do that as a standard. So if you can demonstrate that you do that, you shouldn't have to destroy the crop in the field. It's just ridiculous. What your distrust, it's not about distrust. It's about if you can prove you've the platform to deal with that, then you should be allowed to.
And is it quite low risk to keep it under 1%, or is there still a lot of risk associated with that?
A lot of risk.
So can they not, change legislation or, you know, these regulations to allow for up to 10 to 12 or whatever,
Yeah.
knowing that you have these SOPs in place for removal?
Not that high, because then you've got
Or
let's
say
weed in a field that you can get high off. Someone can come and steal the weed out of the field. You see, FDA would let me grow weed of 10% THC, but it's got to be within a CCTV system, guard dogs, guards. You've got additional security that you don't have with CBD growing.
yeah, which is going to drive your cost up.
Or massively. Massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've got two different, that's why you have two different models.
So now the model in Thailand is it's legal. You're allowed to do at 1%.
Yeah, for hemp, you can
yeah.
have a limited company and you can grow CBD flower for a specific order. You can't just decide, hey, I'm going to grow some CBD.
And wait to see who buys.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Okay. And then what about on the THC side in Thailand? Because we've heard a lot of it becoming decriminalized. Is this allowed now where Thailand's able to produce marijuana plants?
Yeah, people don't really know. I don't even think a lot of lawyers know the legal situation here really clearly. You're allowed to produce, you can get a license to grow THC flower with a government agency, a hospital, or certain units of the armed forces that have been granted permission. There are some other people that have been granted permission for payment to
Yeah.
but that's another story. So effectively, we can grow THC flower here either for research and development, breeding, or a specific order that we're fulfilling within Thailand or overseas. In my case, I'm building an EU GMP facility to service THC orders overseas, as well as obviously the domestic market, which includes clinics and prescriptional-based drugs. So we will be supplying doctors' clinics with oil preparations in tincture bottles initially, and traditional herbal doctors, the flower. So people don't know this yet, but you can smoke flower legally now in Thailand as a prescriptional patient. If you go to a traditional Thai herbal doctors don't even know this themselves, that they're allowed to now prescribe THC flower along with other herbal preparations, which can be smoked on the property or in your own home. That's the law.
But they need a license, obviously.
They need to have done a basic 2-day online course, which entitles them to dispense THC flower. And they then need to buy the flower from a registered, licensed producer. And here is why nothing's got started here. Because we're not even at the stage yet where we've got a finished crop that's been FDA inspected and verified so we can then start selling clinics. So until that happens, only the GPO of being the government pharmaceutical organization have been given the rights to distribute a cannabis-based product, which they make. Which they actually cheated and bought in because they couldn't grow the plants properly.
What is the size of the market in US dollar for this type of product in Thailand?
In Thailand, I don't believe it's going to be.
It can't be that astronomical.
It's not going to be astronomical. I mean, you see market figures for the cannabis industry, $30 to $50 billion by.
In Thailand, 30 to 50.
No, globally and within
Globally.
Asia.
Okay.
I mean, the Asian market. I think if we exclude Thailand, the Asian market is enormous.
Yeah,
It's
but
much
at
bigger
that
than
point,
America.
it's much more difficult. Like you're not importing THC into China.
No, we're exporting,
But they're not allowed to import.
Officially, no, but we actually have got people with licenses to import CBD
From different Asian countries.
into China, yes.
Okay.
So potentially the Asian market is absolutely enormous.
If China opens.
Very, very valuable, yeah. If China opens, it's game on.
Do you think China will go medical?
They're already allowing research into it, yeah. And I actually know somebody now in Beijing growing THC flower.
Okay.
In
Legally.
China.
Legally.
Yeah, legally. Oh, yeah, of course. My goodness. You wouldn't want to do it illegally. No, they're growing it legally with the government.
Do you think Thailand is more or less advanced than most of Asia when it comes to marijuana legislation?
It's the most advanced, without a shadow of a doubt. It's got there. But it's going to lose traction if it doesn't get going quickly with investment soon, because it shunned everyone away with experience.
International investment.
It's got enough investment within Thailand. There's enough Thai billionaires here with cash to set this up and finance it if they wanted to.
So then what's the issue? Why aren't they getting international investment?
we've got the international investment potential. It's just that the people coming in haven't seen a set up structure that they want to back, because the Thais have been not letting in the correct people with the correct skills. So it's only certain people like me that have lived here for long enough, that have access and contacts to all of the relevant skills abroad. I've been able to bring them in and put them together into a team. So therein lies a big problem. I mean, there are lots of investors here that have got big money put in already. They've got plants sitting in 2 feet of water in a field right now. Not a clue. No clue at all. So that's the endemic problem we've got here, yeah.
Isn't there a huge risk of uncertainty with legislation in Thailand, in the sense that rules can change tomorrow? So if I'm an investor and I've put all my money into a farm or a marijuana THC Thai business company that's looking to export, that the government could close the door the next day?
A lot of people worry about Thailand for that perspective. But I have to say I don't. I've lived here for 15 years now. And the first time I came here, I read, there's a coup every 6 years. Everything will change. You'll lose your house. I had to buy my house under a traditional method of purchase. I don't own it. I'm at the will of the government. Have I had a problem? No. Have any of the other hundreds of thousands of francs with up to 20, 30, $50 million villas had problems? No, they haven't. So, no, I don't think we're going to have any problems. They have their little glitches in Thailand, but they sort it internally on their own without anyone poking their nose in. And they just need to be allowed to get on with that cycle. It's happened for years and years. I don't think it's going to change. And if it was Laos or Cambodia, I might be with you. I'd be okay. You know, I'd be more worried.
Well, the worry would be you'd be opening up a Thai company, Thai registered company, to set up this operation and these processes. And everyone knows in Thailand you cannot own a company.
That's wrong.
Oh, Americans can. Americans can own.
An American can own the entire cannabis company, by the way.
Correct.
Technically,
that is correct.
I'm only allowed to
49.
No. It's not. It's 33%.
Okay.
It's traditionally 51.49 for all other businesses except cannabis, which was set by the DBD at 33% foreign ownership maximum.
But an American can own the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's one thing people didn't understand, that Americans are the only one that can own 100% of their business in Thailand.
There's a treaty allowing that, but I think you'd be hard pressed to get complete ownership of a grow. I think you'd be denied. An extraction company, possibly. But then you'd need all the licenses and all the relevant contacts to be able to push that through and get the factory licenses. And if you were the majority owner and therefore greedy, I don't think any ties would help you achieve your goal. So hence why we don't have any rich foreigners that have just come in on their own with their money and arrogantly just taken the pie.
Yeah, and it seems a bit risky, especially in terms of like the land side, because then you are the owner of the company, but now you're still foreign. You can't own the land, and this is your grow up, and you set up the operation, and then unless you have these airtight contracts, the next day someone just takes it all back and kind of closes down shop, which I mean is not unheard of in Thailand.
No, I mean you need to be careful. I'm not going to mention any family names get involved with, but I mean there are certain enterprises going on right now with companies I would be scared to be involved with, because they just bully you out at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's where it gets a bit risky. So, but I mean, as long as you get all your ducks in line and you have the right partners in place and you trust the right people and you have the right contracts.
But they're trying, Thailand.
Yeah.
They're really they are trying to make this appealing to us, and I don't believe that I'm being overtly set up for failure.
So to kind of come back to measure the success of this business, unless countries such as like USA open up and allow you to export then import THC, and Europe as well, I mean, aren't you kind of, again, the ship is sailing while you're building it?
No, it's exactly what.
And you're hoping that they open? Is there a bit of a gamble there?
Let's be clear. Canada's open already.
Okay. But Canada's market we got like 4 people.
Europe is open already.
Okay. So Europe's okay.
Oh yeah.
As long as you have your EU GMP, you're fine in Europe.
Yeah. If you've got the contacts to sell, that's fine.
And all of Europe, or
no? Well,
you've got a European Union.
Even
country.
the UK now.
Okay.
I've even got an LOI for crude oil THC into the UK. Unheard of. for processing.
And we'll let people, letter of intent, meaning that they're
A company in the UK with license
to be able to purchase. And
Wants
as
to-
you said, without an LOI, you can't even start production. So
No, so
Okay.
you've got to get over the chicken and egg, and hence the contacts is useful, because I'm asking people to give me orders without having a finished facility, based on the back of my credibility and my
Yeah.
past performance. So, it's slightly a big deal, but it's the only way to get going here. It can't be done any other way. You have to build the facility, certify it. So you have to go into it with some blind faith. It's doable. Of course it's doable. There's hundreds of facilities certified out there. Just takes time, money, and know-how.
yeah, so there's a bit of risk attached, but I mean, it can pay off quite well if it works out.
Yeah.
And it's I understand that as well. I mean, people think, well, like I was kind of more playing devil's advocate and saying, well, the Thai can come in, they could take your land, they could take your business, but let's be honest, it's relatively new, this industry, and they're not gonna, kill the baby before it even learns to crawl, right? They're gonna give it a chance. It doesn't make any sense why they would, destroy it from the beginning, because they're going to want more foreign investment, let's say 5-10 years down the road. And if you make any issues in the first couple of years, well, then you're going to discourage anyone from coming in. So
I've no doubt Thais are very sensitive to people, foreigners, stealing what potentially could have been some action that they could get. But they don't mind sharing. So I think in the long term, if we help them achieve a big business, they can't do us over for one main reason. We control the export side of it and the contacts to Farang land outside Thailand, okay? Now, if they disrupt any of the production and anything going on here, we'll just move production to another country.
yeah.
It's us with the contacts and the end buyers.
And you
So-
still have your machine, you still have your assets.
Yes,
that
of
can be moved quite easily.
Yeah, so, I don't think they're going to have a problem there, no.
What's the majority of the investment? Sorry to interrupt on that. Is it going to be the machinery itself?
About half-half. So if you look at, for example, a total spend of $50 million on a cannabis company, probably 20 was sunk into the cost of building indoor growing facilities to make indoor AAA THC flower. 15-20 was spent on extraction testing equipment, and 10 was operating expense.
So then it's easy. Yeah, I mean, you can pick your stuff up and move.
It's quite a big chunk on extraction.
And what about on your side, Nicholas? I know you're just here on holidays, kind of come to chill out after working in the U.S., but do you have any intentions or plans of getting into this industry while you're here? Because it's almost like you're in the right place at the right time with the right expertise.
It wasn't an accident. After I left the U.S., I wanted to travel a bit, but I chose countries that all had either already significant economies or burgeoning marijuana economies. I kind of wanted to combine, make it useful at least. But there's, like James has said, there's not a lot of information, even in Thailand, on what's happening on the regulations. So since coming here, I've learned quite a lot of it. I mean, how it's growing. It seems to be growing a lot. So having seen it, I'm definitely interested in. I think a lot of people are going to be very interested from the U.S. and Canada too.
Are you kind of just keeping your ear to the floor now? For example, if extraction or formulation testing facilities start to open up in Thailand, that would you be looking to take on like a consulting type of role, a business partner type of role? Are you kind of just watching carefully, or are you sitting back?
I've been watching carefully. I would be interested in some capacity entering it. I think the last couple of years, I entered marijuana in Colorado when it was growing, and then I kind of saw it come to a level of adoption where we were going to enter a new phase that people like him are creating, where it's a globalization. And I think the industry in America and Canada are going to change a lot, and the people working there are going to undergo a lot of changes in the coming years as the world kind of catches up. So I do this because it's interesting, and I want to do something very interesting, and this is the most interesting thing in cannabis, I think, right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is pioneers at the forefront of this industry, especially in terms of U.S. and Canada understanding that it's not feasible to do the farming back on that land. Do you see this as a major barrier that if it does not become federally legalized in the U.S., that it could be quite difficult for, let's say, a Thai company to be able to survive, or do you believe that the European market could keep them alive regardless?
I think it's a big market and anyone would want to sell to them. But I think that if America does not federally decriminalize, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot because other countries are going to step up. I mean, there's the domestic market that can make a lot of people very happy in the States, but there is beyond the domestic market as well. So, and if you can't ship in, and you can't even ship across state lines, you're not going to be a part of that party. So they've done really well now. I have faith that they're going to open up too.
Do you think it will turn more to like how the supplement industry works, in the sense, let's talk about any type of supplement. You could take moringa powder, whatever. A lot of these supplement industry, the way that it works is all the products, they get the raw material, come from China. It comes into the U.S. and it goes to GMP facilities where they do the processing, which honestly all they're doing is taking the product and putting it into a capsule and closing it in a bottle. Now, the reason you do that is so you can write Made in USA on the bottle. So that's what I foresee the American market, capitalizing. They would be more involved on the bottling stages.
Absolutely. They've got a lot of processes set up now with a lot of expensive equipment. And fairly soon they're going to be underused. So most of them are going out of business now anyway. And what's left at the end of the day I'm lining them up right now to send material to perform other added value services on my wholesale products. Because, they might well be able to make certain things like vape cartridges for me. And I send the oil. They just basically put the whole lot together. So, that sort of service is economic, where it's done with a machine versus time in America. And it has to be done for legal reasons. I'm not allowed to make vape cartridges here in Thailand. Canada wants millions of THC vape cartridges, so I can send the THC oil to Canada, to a clean room, GMP clean room, make the carts, sell them to a wholesaler from there.
But a lot of people don't understand that it's almost a monopoly on the GMP processing side in the US, because let's be honest, why can you not just capsule it in Thailand and put it in a bottle and say made in Thailand? I think it's because the western side of the world has added this negative connotation attached to any product not made in Canada, not made in USA. But the reality is the product is literally going to come from Asia. It's going to go to the US and they're going to put it into a bottle. What is any different of that being put in a bottle in, let's say, or in any type of form in Asia and being sent over there? And in fact, you're probably going to save I know on my side, probably save 10% on costs, which I'm just going to pass on to the end user anyways. So I don't know if it's more of a statement or a question. I guess the question more is, like, why can't we operate with that school of thought?
I'm actually going to be open-minded. I'll make the products here in the EU GMP facility in Thailand. And if I see any issues with uptake of that because of the distrust of Asia, then I will simply get it reboxed, because I'm not breaking chain of custody for the fact that it's been out of an EU GMP facility. So when the final label, made in US, bottled in US, EU GMPs on the box, it's all true. It's come from an EU GMP to another one in the States. Just as you know, politically, we can now stick made in US on the box. Well, if that's worth more.
You can't put made in the US here if you bottle it here.
No, if we bottle it here, but we won't bottle it, we'll send it in a bulk bottle, which it's loaded into a machine that then bottles it and boxes it. Yeah. And for the simple issue of doing that,
just to put the made in US.
Just to put the sticker on it, basically, made in US. So I'll do either. If it looks like it's an issue for buyers. Yeah.
Well, unless come on YouTube, make this podcast go viral, because if people understood that, they'd be like, so I can pay less if I just says made in Thailand, but it's the same shit.
It's the same quality.
People would come up and be like, fuck off GMP US, put made in Thailand, and I can save 10% at the end cost.
We're going to hope, yeah. And look, we were talking about pricing earlier, about how we're going to price things. If we can convey to for example, the American public that our CBD products made in a facility here are just as good, they'll be like half the price.
Yeah.
But if worst comes to worst, we're still going to win because we're going to send them and bottle them in America, and then we'll still sell them at half price. Yeah. So either way, they're going to get the same product cheaper because I've got 10 times cheaper labor. Whether it means I need to badge it from here or from Thailand at the end of the day.
And anything in terms of control, consistency, quality control, it's much safer to do everything at a single facility.
Of course.
Why are we passing stuff all around just to, have this happy label on the back? Okay, I think we've talked a lot. We covered a lot of stuff. Before we jump out, I was going to throw it to Nicholas because I know as well before we were chatting that not only this podcast you wanted to come and share your expertise, but you could learn as well a little bit of what's going on. Did you have any questions for James, or did we kind of cover enough that any questions that you wanted to ask him?
I think my question would be, you already spoke to the size of the Thai domestic market, and I'm interested in kind of where Thailand do you think is going to sit in the next 10 years just within Asia? And what the role it's going to come to serve in marijuana in this region, really.
Well, if Thailand get their way, some initiatives that people might not realize Thailand are doing at the moment. They're creating a medical center of excellence in Thailand at the moment. And they want Thailand to become Asia's premier place to come for medical treatment, be it dental, medical, holistic treatment. So they're spending serious money creating these wellness centers around Thailand, centers of excellence where you can go and get a multitude of different things. The cannabis fits in with that model because they want to be the mega center for cannabis for Asia. And they've got such a large way ahead of all the other Asian countries. I don't think that anyone else will get traction now as quick. So if they don't screw us up, I do actually think they're going to become the center of cannabis for the planet in Thailand, really. It's not a joke. There's no reason why they can't. They've got the environment, the people. If they bring in the skills and the money, it's all doable. We will replace the States for sure.
Well, the Head Start the Head Start was the biggest thing in the U.S. Colorado has so many, brands that are all over America and Canada now because they had extra time to develop those brands too.
Well, I've been going,
Because of Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado and brands are all over the U.S. now. So
it did us a favor, really. It showed us how the markets work, how they play out, what people like, what they don't. The amount of information that we can glean from Colorado and other US
on a global scale.
So we are bringing all that knowledge, and that's how we're going to hit the ground running on day one here. It's going to be.
Yeah, and also in terms of the geopolitical structure in Southeast Asia, Thailand's your best choice. Not to talk shit on places like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos.
Love Vietnam.
Yeah, they're great places, but they're just not as stable as Thailand. Places like Indonesia, you get your head chopped off. Singapore, death penalty, things like this. It's just Thailand. It makes the most sense.
Well, they're not Muslim. And it's nothing against.
Well, that's why I didn't say that.
It's nothing against religion, but the Muslim religion forbids drugs. Forbids drugs, and I cannot imagine any change in the religious status of the Quran or anything that would enable drugs to be.
Otherwise, this could work in Malaysia.
So, I've got very big contacts in Malaysia, really, really big, and they're actually the royal family, so they can do what they like, but even they're hesitant to just do something because, as they said, look, if we make stuff here in Thailand, they could get away with producing THC or CBD in a grow in Malaysia. No problem. No one will touch them. But you can't export it because as a country, it's illegal. So as long as it remains illegal for the country, it's never a commercial viable concept. It has to be allowed by the country now. They have to decriminalize and actually allow it in their society.
I think that's more on the religion side than the political side.
And it is totally. That's why it will never happen in Malaysia, realistically. It's definitely not in Indonesia, I don't think, on a huge scale.
It'd be interesting in Indonesia because especially, I mean, it's sad, but these countries flourish from palm oil. So pick your poison.
And historically,
Yeah.
they have long histories with marijuana too.
Yeah.
Like the genetics that have come from Laos, Cambodia, Thailand.
Yeah.
Oh, Cambodia, Laos are different.
Laos would be a bit difficult for transportation.
Laos have been inviting us in to giving us free electric, free water,
Ah, okay.
free licenses, no corporation tax for 14
So they've
years.
been pretty liberal.
Oh, they're major liberal. But the other issue there is the political instability that wouldn't make you want to go there, because you really could have a general turn up with an AK-47,
Yeah.
and you're gone.
And then Myanmar's just out of the question.
And that's another question. Nice people, but you've got the same issues with the
Yeah.
geopolitical instability.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
So no, I think Thailand's your best option.
Set.
Yeah.
And there are parallel things happening here that feed into the tourist industry.
It's massive. I mean, tourism in now we've got COVID. It's very sad, but will return. Thailand's loved by most of the people in the world as a holiday destination. And we are setting up massive amounts of weed hotels, should we call them, resorts. So, wellness clinics.
Yeah,
name them what you like. But
Weed tourism.
weed tourism is going to be huge.
I think that wraps it up. We'll do a couple quick little plugs. I guess first, James, that's your camera. So anything you want to plug in terms of your Instagram handle. I only saw you had one picture, so probably you don't care people going there.
No.
Let them know where to find you, and take it away. You can talk to the camera.
So, you can contact me at my Instagram page, James Donald. What was my Instagram? Just remind me.
We'll put it here.
We'll-
James
we'll-
Donald.
We'll put it out in a second. That's the easiest way. I have to stay low with my contactability because of the number of people I get pestered by. But connect to me on LinkedIn if you want to have a chat with me, and I'll get back to you. I do reply to most people that connect to me.
Yeah, and don't send me any messages for James. I'll just tell you to take a hike. So.
Yeah.
Okay, and Nicholas, any information if people are in this industry looking for you or
we can put my email up. I don't have anything to plug, but I would plug Thailand. Come to Phuket.
come to
visit
Phuket. Well, we can throw your
Sandbox.
Instagram. You want your Instagram handle or no?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, we'll throw the Instagram handle. You throw the email out there. Who knows? Some Russian hackers somehow read this message. Next thing you got 5 million.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, that's everything on our side. That was a quite interesting podcast. I think I need a beer after that one though. So we are Fruiting Body. We are a medicinal mushroom company. We'll tell you a lot more about that later with stuff coming out. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Do not forget to subscribe and like if you've made it this far. I know you've probably clicked off. I do it. Everyone does it. But smash the subscribe, smash the like, and see you in the next one.